Okay, so finalizing edits for the book. Brian has sent some things that I still had not seen to, right? Some of the line items that Anthony had suggested,
Yeah.
and either I didn't do it or I missed it when I did the edits. So
Yeah.
because Brian is banging out, trying to get our book where we can start proofing it, which is amazing. I mean, I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to get it done, right? And so he sent something, and I'm ashamed to say something we've never play tested, something we've never given any adherence to. And I thought before I spend time editing this, we should talk about why that is, and we should talk about whether we need it, which I think we do, but it kind of changes certain things that we didn't define earlier in the book. So we'll talk about that. And also, you had a question, Derek, and you had a question about whether you wanted the authors' names on the front of the book. And you're the art director. I think you decide how you think that looks, what that looks like. I don't care whether our names are on the cover of the book or not, but I'll leave that entirely to you. So that was one of the issues that came up in the last couple of days. I wasn't online to see it until yesterday. And then I think there may be a third thing that I want to talk about, but I don't think so. Those might be the only two questions. Whether we want our names on the cover of the book, whether you want your name and picture on the cover of the book.
Okay.
Right. You're smiling maw there on the cover of the book.
I gotta write down a couple of things too, because
and really, before I edit this and fix, because the great thing is what Brian sent, it's one page of things that I obviously missed, or that I probably months, this would have been like a year ago when I submitted, whenever we put up August of 2020, we put up our PDF of the book. And because this is going to be the actual hardcover first edition book, I thought, we should talk about this. All right, so I'll preface this by saying we have been from the beginning a pseudo-historical fantasy game, low magic, but we have never defined how magic can manifest itself. We've only defined that you can use the mind or you can use spirit to call upon supernatural things, right? And we don't have spells, and we've never limited players in a way to how they would express their druid's actions to manifest magic or some supernatural effect. And it's worked okay in the play. We've never had anyone step way outside those bounds. Everybody seems to take to it based on the genre and the technology level that we're presenting. I've never had a player do something crazy, I've had them invoke miracles or ask for miracles. I've had them do minor things that would be that would affect the world. We had Kevin very adroitly call upon lightning against the horse rider in one of our play tests, which completely worked. It was like a lightning crash to spook to run. I can't remember exactly what the dragon, something swooped in on me, used lightning and it spooked the horse off the barge, whatever. You remember all that, right? Kevin, it was great.
Yeah.
And it was very natural. We never really had rules for how to do it. And I can't remember. So I'm getting to the point of words of power, right? So Mark, knowing that our game, and Mark presented that as part of Mark's work for our book, which I loved, words of power. And there's like a list of like 6 words of power that you can use to either do these things or to an effect against somebody who does these things to you. And that, in a way, was our magic. It was the limitations of what you could do to affect play in game by using words of power. I am so ashamed to say we have never once used it. We have never once even talked about it. And I have never used it at the table. None of my players who have read the book, locally or online, I'm assuming the players online have read the book. I know that Brian and Katie and Phil and everybody has the PDF copy and they've read it. We didn't use it. They didn't invoke magic in mind and spirit checks with those words either. And it seems to me it's a wonderful way to using structure and a rules paradigm. It's a great way to show how you can use mind and spirit and limit certain effects of how magic would affect this very, in a way, realistic fantasy world, right? So before I sat down here to correct some things in the grammar and correct some things in the rule book, clarifications, and write examples, which I have done. I've written examples here while waiting. So people in the book would understand how to invoke your spirit, so to speak. It just dawned on me yesterday when I first saw what I needed to fix. I went, "Ooh, why have we never used it? Why are our players not asking about it? Like nobody's come to the table saying, 'Hey, dude, how do these words of power work?'" Right? So
I'll tell you,
I suppose as developers, designers, and here we are with a year, almost our PDF having been out for over 18 months, probably almost 20 months, maybe 2 years. And we're hopefully this year, in the next few months, going to have a hard copy book.
Yeah.
I suppose we should examine, that very long-winded way of saying, what do you think about it? Number one, do you think it's something we should keep in the book? And three, why aren't we using it?
Okay. Yeah,
yesterday, because it's your fault.
Yeah, a lot of different and some similar questions entered my mind whenever I saw the page that Brian dropped. I got up in the morning. Yesterday morning, for some reason, I was off, and I literally slept till after 12. First time in years I ever did that.
Yeah.
So, she was like, "There's coffee in there," and I was like, "Great, I need some," because I felt like tired. I was getting up.
You probably you are tired, dude. That's how your body tells you you're tired, man.
I said, "What?" And I saw it was after 12 o'clock, and I said, "What?" And she goes, "I made it this morning. You've been asleep."
Holy! Well, that's cool that you were able to sleep like that.
Well, yeah, I did. I got my coffee, and I saw what Brian had dropped, so I opened it up, and I did a re-edit, and I sent it back in the email.
Okay.
And
you did?
I think that you were copied on it. Now, I want to let you know, because you've been working on it some too, and maybe we can, from both our perspectives, come to a middle ground on this. Now, what occurred to me when I read it, and you're right, we didn't use the terminology of words of power. Now, I thought it was a reference. I didn't remember if you did that or he did it. It seemed a little bit off of, a little bit misrepresentative of what we wanted to get to, but almost close to it in a way that we don't really try to quantify stuff solidly. It's more like suggestive or a guide that we're putting out there. Mm-hmm. And especially where magic is concerned. And it's a good thing we had that talk with, before in recent discussions, how to quantify it. And to me, it was that's why I mentioned barbarians and basilisks, because that whole, the pleasure I derive from playing and using concepts, especially in the supernatural realm or the spiritual, or even if I'm playing a mage and I'm trying to say that I'm using chemicals or powders or whatever, mm-hmm. To do it, I get to creatively mm-hmm. describe what I'm doing. And then we had that balance that we entrusted the players to self-balance with their own abilities and with the world is what would be mm-hmm. logical. You know what I mean? Sitting around a table. So that's why I believe that we've never seen anybody ever use.
I agree. But, we have a remarkable trump card system, and there's the only way to explain it to, say, a layperson who's going to play our game, who's going to present our game, and had some guy at the table who says, "I'm going to create an earthquake. I'm going to call upon, God Almighty to rattle the earth and bring down the walls of Jericho," whatever, right? Awesome. But how do we control whether a player gets crazy? I'm like Superman. I'm gonna take flight and fly like the wind. I'm not gonna say no. I'm gonna say okay.
Difficulty.
I'm gonna give it a DV 16. Make a mind check. That's how we
Yeah.
easily control.
Yeah.
So the dude better have a mind of 4. He better be having an excellent rod of power, and he's going to have to roll basically. See what I'm saying? And then it's an amazing magical moment. But it's gonna. We can control whether a player does something. Because invoking, I mean, imagine this, right? I'm standing in the street and I say, "God Almighty, give me the power to strike dead that man with a machine gun across the street." I can say it and I can call upon it, but I don't really have the power to make God Almighty do that for me, right? It would be a miracle if indeed it happened. And so there's nothing wrong with a player in our game saying, "I'm going to take flight and fly like the wind, actual flight to London to save the girl." You can say it, doesn't mean it's going to happen. But I'm not going to say, "Come on, Joe. Joe, no." I'm going to say DV18. Good luck.
There is the secondary, whatever salient attribute is required, are pulled up to be based on the root attribute to approach any kind of a situation like that, like you're calling from. And this is what I did. I'll get to in a second, but what I saw that I hadn't really realized before that he was talking about in Words of Power. So that this to me helped me at least go, we can put all of this in a bubble. Not only like where I initially thought, like if you were a wizard or a mage using alchemical stuff, or if you was a spiritualist using somatics and calling upon blessings. Those two things I knew kind of that we was trying to give. But the Words of Power, if you'll see it like prestige of like calling into an area to where you do that. So Mark did that. He was trying to parse out the different ways of approach. And I hadn't thought about, of course, when we were playing, we just say, if you walk into a room, like if you're a 2 in prestige and you can affect these peasants, there's no need for a call. But if anything is questionable, mm-hmm. then you have to roll against DV if it becomes problematic or something that you're not, whether it's time restriction or whatever. So we have that too to work off of. So I believe, to me, it struck me like Words of Power that, I don't necessarily want to. It automatically happens within the game. Like if I walked into a room, like I said, and you say, "Call your prestige," yes. Or if I'm wanting to do something, hey, call on spirit. So I don't know if necessarily trying to say. One thing I think in role-playing games is when, from rules lawyers and everybody else, that if it takes you out of immersion, if you feel like you can quantify everything by a rule or a prerequisite. That's why I don't like those words. I like using like, this is a suggestive guide. Even when we started the game, I know people like a rule book, but a guidebook, mm-hmm. because a lot of it is intuitively, and this is where we want to structure the game. That's the problem. Based off of.
The aim of the game is to provide enough structure and mechanism that the players, the culture of play with your group, will identify itself, and you'll come into a comfortable groove of how you guys like to express the mechanics. Right, at your culture play at your table. And so our game is saying these are their rules, there's a structure here, but you'll come to a happy medium of how you recognize speech and how Brother Aethelwald calls upon a miracle praying in the streets to feed the masses. And I recognized instantly what he's doing. He doesn't have to say, "I would like to try a miracle here to feed the people." But he could have, and it would have worked, no problem. Very informal, very formal, whatever you want to call it. Right, but when it's in the book and it says Words of Power and it has this list of things and it suggests that these are the things you need to do. 3. So, and the irony is I love the Words of Power, but I'm not certain if we put Words of Power in there as a particular thing that a particular a person can do, or if we. Right now, it's the context is, here's Words of Power, here's how it works. To some degree, I haven't given any examples yet. I just wrote some this morning. I wrote one example of how this works, which is how our game works. So it's like, dude, everything you do in our game, if it calls upon a challenge versus a DV, whether it's combat, conversation, a magic, spiritual effect, jumping the pit, whatever the hell it is, all of it invokes, all of it will demand this test. So words of power is really exactly our game system, but there's supposed to be ways to invoke spirit, mind, prestige, or give a bonus. Like if I boast out loud, well, I have conquered the Vikings in the north. I have done these things. You will listen to me at this Witten because I hold sway, and I'm calling upon my prestige. Well, my prestige is already there. It would already be used.
It's already back in the game.
By boasting, I would get a bonus because we don't identify in the rules if words of power give a bonus or not. It just invokes that I'm calling up my prestige. Well, a DM, a presenter should know that anyway, right? You should be aware of my prestige as I'm trying to influence the Witten. And if my prestige is 1, I may have gotten that prestige of 1 because I vanquished a Viking in the north. It's already represented in the mechanics of the game. Because I vanquished a Viking in one of those sessions, I got a prestige point, right? Or I got a repute point, which I put on my prestige to reflect that I vanquished the Viking in the north. It's already accounted for in our basic. So I guess for me, it's like it really works. And it works as a way of controlling and structuring how far our world will allow these magical events, etc. But at the same time, I am concerned that becomes the rule. That becomes the literal paradigm for how you would use how you would use this thing.
It's more restrictive in a way that, like I said, it's trying to quantify what we're doing, and it does. An example, and that's all I did with my edit. I still use words of power, which that can be erased because I do agree with you on that. But when I was reading it, I was like, well, essentially, is saying what we do already. But I didn't like the italicized, like boast, or like it, like you could go down a list and say, I'm going to activate boast, or I'm going to activate this, because it doesn't allow for like free expression of being in the moment. Right. It's like you got to reference back to that character sheet and go, okay, what does my character have?
Right.
He has boast.
Right.
Which undermines.
Well, if you have a character, I think in the beginning of as a matter of fact, at the in character gen, there's kind of some capsules. There are character capsules. Oh, if you want a priest, here's how you would build a priest. We don't tell you that your priest can't, but you can grab one of those professions. They're like example capsules of how you would build a barbarian or whatever. So you don't have to, if you're not familiar with how the game works, we just give you an idea. Okay, I want to build a merchant, But some of them have prerequisites and actually give you bonuses. Like a warrior gives you a body bonus automatically. So there's a way for you to get a better body, even though you only start with 3 repute points. So those are rules. It actually matters if you take warrior, right? Okay. Some of them say words of power are part of your. So on your character sheet, you would have all the words of power that you would invoke or use. And we have never paid attention to that. We have never used it. And it's like, holy cow, somebody would come to our table, let's say at the convention. I mean, one of the reasons we're having this conversation, this is a good reason to look back on the book, what we've been doing and how we've been doing it, what we've been saying our game's about, and how we've been teaching our game, and how we've been enjoying our game, and how other people has presented our game incredibly well. Sam, Kevin, both, Brian, all of them presented our game brilliantly, right? Very naturally. And not any of us use words of power, right? So anyway, it comes down to this. Okay, I'm at a convention. These guys come in. They want to play with the guys who rate the game. They want to sit at our table for a 2-hour session on the Saturday night at the convention, and they have their character sheet. And the guy comes in with his words of power written down, and he says, "I'm going to boast, blah blah blah, to invoke my." And I'd be like, I would have to stop and say, "You don't even have to say that." So
right. That's what I'm saying. You have to reference a rule to say that this is what you're applying,
correct,
or an ability.
But
it's counterintuitive.
If I make a merchant who has a mind of 3, but he doesn't have words of power, it would clarify among how our game functions that my merchant is never going to suddenly use magic. He's never going to suddenly, right? But my merchant could certainly boast that I advised the king in the north when he won the war against the Vikings. That's not magical. And it stays within the bounds of our pseudo-historical, grounded, low magic, right? So part of the reason I like the words of power is it reminds everybody this is a low magic, in a way, very formal class structured society, and you can invoke God and you can invoke the saints, and You can try to infect play in a certain way. So there's a side of me too that says, but words of power adds to the whole atmosphere of what Dark Age of Man is supposed to be, even as a structure of rules, right? So I'm conflicted because we do it without having to actually limit anyone or actually to demand they have a class that uses words of power or invoke them a particular way. But at the same time, there's nothing to stop my merchant Janus in our chronicles from becoming a spiritual man and calling upon. And so I've already witnessed enough along the way. I've already been healed. I've already had a miracle upon me that's healed my illness. I've witnessed your version of a Christian, which did not jive with what Janus's version of Christians would look like. So now all of a sudden, why are there 20,000 denominations in Christianity? Because Christians can't agree on how to be a Christian. Right? So my character already is going. I'm going to follow the sandal, right? It's already Monty Python. My character is going to follow the sandal, right? Of Jesus' sandal denomination, right? So my character is already becoming a spiritual man who's not a man of God. Why can't he then invoke the spirit of I would become the follower of the Saint Aethelwald. I mean, my character is clearly becoming a follower of Saint Aethelwald, not of Christ.
Or look at Paul in the Bible.
So I would be calling upon Aethelwald when I try to do spiritual miracles, and that couldn't happen.
Exactly.
If we limited words of power to certain classes. Right.
Yeah, if you pre-prescribed boundaries at the onset for your character, then you say, I am playing a merchant, and so it doesn't allow expression.
It doesn't allow growth. It doesn't allow my character. And it doesn't allow my character to. So here's my problem with role-playing games. We level up. So how do we represent progress in all role-playing games? You just level up. Yeah. That's how you show. Our game, we represent change and progress through our character actually evolving, not in just leveling up. My character is becoming a spiritual person because of Saint Aethelwald, not because of the church, not because of you, your character, not because of Falcone, not because of Jesus Christ, not because of because of who has impacted his life and saved his. So my character is slowly evolving from a secular man of money to a spirit and witnessing what's happening in the world. And I'm thinking that couldn't happen as a fighter in D&D. I would just get better as a fighter. Now I could represent it as just a vain example of my character now believing in the Cleric's God and having his back all the time, but I would have no power in D&D as a cleric, right? Unless you that's why we let you dual class. Yeah, because guess what? D&D one day woke up, the people in D&D said, "Dude, I'm tired. I'm always a fighter. I'd like to have some thief skills." So they invented dual classing, right? To solve the problem of being stuck as a fighter for 14 levels in 6 years in a D&D campaign. Our game is saying if the world affects you and you actually change as a character, you actually start putting repute points in your mind and your spirit, you can evolve into a druid, you can evolve into a warrior. You could be a lowly monk who sees unbelievable violence against the monks at a monastery, and you slowly become a warrior monk. You slowly eschew the passive turn the other cheek philosophy, and you start taking up a sword and become a fucking warrior monk, right? Our game allows you to have the world impact you in such a way you evolve as a person, not just as a leveling up system.
And for situations it gives gravitas to the situations that are in the game, because they do affect characters. And if you limit that, you're really limiting the game, the scope, and the capacity.
Well, then what's happening, and you're right, what's happening is you're predefining how you can deal with any problem. Right? Oh, the game says there's only so many ways I can deal with this problem. I can pick the lock, I can avoid the lock, or I can just take the shot and break the lock. When there's structured rules, it says, "Oh, here's the 4 ways you can deal with the lock." That's just the rules. How do you want to go about doing it, Jason? We want to avoid that. Every situation has certain limited avenues to resolve, right? We don't know who's going to fall to their knees and call upon a miracle. The most vile peasant thief in our game could have a moment where he falls on his knees, and cries out for a miracle, right? Or becomes the most vile, heinous criminal and finds ways to mix poisons to take care of his enemies or whatever the case may be. He doesn't have to have a class that lets him mix poisons.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh no, I 100% agree. In fact, anything. I think we have a natural proclivity to try to quantify things mechanically in a game because we're so used to playing so many role-playing games, and it's almost like a little anxiety there that you have to feel like you have to add something to keep a structure to it. When through our own experience in play testing and playing Dark Age of Man, nothing intuitively. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like if somebody said, "Do a fighter." I don't think, a fighter gets a bonus, because it's in the same respect that you can change your worldviews and your professions in game. To me, it's almost a moot doubling up point. It's like going, okay, he's a fighter, so let's stamp an extra point here. I would just literally say, okay, guys, we're starting out with 4 points or 3 points or whatever. And what do you want to be? Well, I picture myself as a sellsword. I'm gonna allocate and point by and put my points toward that end. As in the examples that we give for each type of potential class, or you can create your own, or it's conceptual, right? So, I mean, the person that has a conceptual design that's really not quantifiably in the list of like, here's a fighter, he gets an extra bonus. So we're encouraging people to stay within those confines of, I'm a fighter because I get this. If I just build my own concept, I don't get squat for extra. I'm just saying this extra point is kind of need be, because a lot of the way the play is dependent on your stats. It's dependent on
that's gaming, because if not, it's no. I mean, I want players to start the game with 3 repute. They should come to the game knowing that they've already existed in the world for a period of time, and that they at least start the game as 3 repute peasant, which means, okay, so is that 3 repute on your body? Is it mixed among your mind, your spirit, and your body? You're a very balanced peasant. You go to church on Sundays. You also have been learning how to read and write from Father. And so tell me that story. Tell me that my 3 repute, in one sentence, I have been learning how to read and write, so my mind is improved. By the time as my character, as the curtain opens on our movie of these 2 characters we're going to meet, I am a 17-year-old snot-nosed peasant with no prestige, but I put my 3 points in 3 different attributes. I'm a balanced peasant, right? I like that. I'm okay, and I want people to pick warrior, and they get armor, and they get a sword, and they're going to start the game there. That isn't how they're going to end the game. Promise you. They may end the game king. Yeah. They may end the game peasant. They may end the game stripped of everything and an outlaw, right? That'll show up. It'll happen based on how you play. Actions. Don't tell me, show me. And if you're a man of God, and show me that through your play, right? And you can become a man of God as a warrior, right? But if you're going to be a man of God, how many times have you played with guys that are clerics, and they're at no point do you even recognize they're men of God or women of God? They're just playing. That's a class that they want to have because they want to heal and they want to turn undead. They're actually not presenting a zealot. They're not presenting somebody who would be so empowered by their God that they could turn undead, that they could call upon miracles. So how many times have you been at a D&D table where people are basically playing they're playing a set of tools. They're not actually a character that is a cleric, right?
Yeah, and that's what I don't want to do, is give any kind of inclination toward those players to continue that type of focused gameplay.
Or worse, no focused gameplay. This is the Dark Ages. If you're a man of the church, there's a lot that goes into that, and the presenter should put in front of that man of the church, the church.
Yeah.
You don't get just to be a vague man of God and not have to meet the responsibilities of the abbey and meet the responsibilities of taking care of the poor, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I didn't have to with I didn't have to do that with Brian. Brian said, I'm on my patrol. I'm with my dogs. I'm on the patrol. Brian, he wanted to be a character that he said, hey, this is what I do. And he actually did it. He said in narrative, dude, I'm on my patrol. I'm doing my thing. And what did Sam do? I didn't have to remind him, dude, you're a man of God. There's people starving in the streets. Don't you want to acknowledge this? No, he did. He acknowledged it as a man of God.
Yeah.
But I played with many people who just, they don't encapsulate a human being. Those become stats that they use to mechanically have an advantage.
Well,
I
mean,
think our game
the
changes
games are
that.
set up. The games, most typical games are set up to reward, and that's why I've called it for years like hand-led and spoon-fed, because it's like they don't entrust the players to inhabit a character and represent a character, but that rather they say, okay, no, I'm going to tell you what if you choose this, I'm going to tell you what you can get and what you can do, and you use my sheet that you can draw from to do these things, and it makes it to where the players are just taking information from the sheet and transposing it into play, but they're not being a character. So it really inhibits or stymies IC play, which is what we want, and that's why I want to stay away from all that prerequisite talk or what have you. That's why I'm more geared toward like, this is suggestive. These are suggested, like here's an example of these characters.
Yeah.
That you can use, and a fighter would naturally.
Well, and I
have
think
like
we
this.
do that because we also say, if you want to make your own, here's how you make your own. Grab one of these if you want to. But if you grab that capsule, make sure you have your arm. Make sure you understand you get an armor and a sword of this caliber. It's not prerequisite. It's just if you're going to grab that capsule, don't worry about your armor and your shield. You've got it already, right? So it's just a capsule.
No, agreed.
And then you're free to make whatever you dream up, right? Within the 3 points that you have to spend, right? And all of that. And then how you tell me who your character is and how you show me who your character is, we'll all begin to recognize who Vidar Watt is, right? It's not, you're not an avatar. You're not just another fighter with a sword and a shield, and your job is to just be a tank or be a soak for damage, etc. No, right? Your word is bond, and how you present them is going to dictate my difficulty levels, right? So where our game, I think, presenters will figure it out, and they'll be very relaxed with how the world can be and how players can be, have player agency and players can be free. They have the DV. And if you tell me you're a man of God and then you want to perpetrate a vile action, like stabbing the guard with a poison dagger, I'm setting, okay, the guard is actually like in the game, it's like a 3 or 4, right? I'm setting that fucking DV to 9 because a man of God doesn't use a poison dagger, right? Right?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm setting that DV up there, and then somebody's going, why suddenly is the guard so much more powerful? He's not. It's that difficult to pull a weapon and use poison against this guard in front of a mob of people. So I don't have to represent it as he's somehow more powerful. I represent it that people see you draw the weapon and they back away and they scream, and all of a sudden you're standing there exposed with this dagger looking around, and the guard's like, holy shit, what are you doing? That's how I say a man of God in my game. You told me you were a man of God. You pull something like that, I'm going to make it very, very difficult. Now, after that happens, and we've seen what you're about, next time you show that you're really more of a sleazy assassin, I'm not going to punish you for drawing your sword. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's punitive in a way because you represent a particular character, and then right. You see what I'm saying? But there is no hard and fast rules that now the DV is always at 9 when you draw. No. It's situational, and it's based upon what you've been representing, etc., etc. But you don't have to. Sam doesn't have to, right? He can allow you to express your character to the table and to the world and what kind of person you are. He doesn't have to deter that at all. And our game evolves naturally. We get to see who Dale's character is. We get to see what level you'll stoop to. You didn't call upon God to You didn't call upon God to part the ways for you. You pulled the dagger and you murdered the guard, right? So it shows your character. What's brilliant about it is it shows your character doesn't have faith that the gods will actually do it for you. But you use it as a weapon, and then you actually use the weapon itself to make it look like you had the power of God behind you. And it's that can't. If the rules are hard and fast, we don't get to see Dale's character manifest himself. Not your character sheet, not your mechanics. Your human being. Your human being manifested himself in a way that is going to be 100% completely different than if there's a million people who play our game and play Chronicles or campaigns, there will be literally a million complete unique stories not just another dungeon, not just another fighter in another party that does the same thing every other fighter does: tank up, take blows, and dish out damage. Right.
Yeah.
So I would have punitively said, okay, you've been sending the world a message that you're a man of God. You've been praying on your walk. I might have been more punitive about how sneaky you could be.
Toward
right?
Everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And until you in the world have shown, oh, you're really not that guy. And next time you do it, well, the DV would be, whatever it is, 3 or 4, whatever. How Sam does it. And that's my point about being the presenter. How you present the game, it's not about GMing it. It's not about adjudicating it. It's about saying, wait, I'm naive. The world's been seeing you a certain way. You're not. This is interesting. So I'm gonna have the world clap back a little bit here on you. But Sam's like, be that character. But now you've acted. We've seen your actions in the world. We now know manifestly what you've done. Right?
Yeah.
And now he could make things harder for you every time you call upon God. So Sam might make your DV for every chance that you try God, because you've shown, dude, you are far from a man of God. So you pray all you want, invoke those words of power all you want. Your DV is way the hell up here now, man. So you better just keep drawing that dagger, right? So this is what I love about our game. Yeah. So I, before the hand, might say, wait a minute, this is going to be hard for you because you haven't presented yourself as an assassin. You presented yourself as a monk, a man of God with this thing, right? And so in my world, it's harder to pull that off, right?
Yeah.
But now in Sam's world, it might be harder to actually use your spirit, right? Which is why I love our game. Players can be completely unique and play and be, and presenters can handle the game naively, however they kind of perceive the situation. I perceive the situation as, whoa, I would have said, dude, this is going to be hard. Good luck to drag this deck. Sam didn't even ask you for a wall. He just allowed it to happen.
That interpretation, though,
is brilliant.
We're allowed to do that in play because the mechanics, like you said, the DV is on the presenter.
Correct.
He interprets what's happening when it needs to be applied.
And everything in the rules is a base. So if you just get into combat with assassins, there's a DV there of 7, just to give you an idea what the assassin means in the world. You could be strict with it, or you can play with the difficulty based on atmosphere. Well, you're not fighting one assassin. You're fighting an assassin in a river straddling rocks. The DV is 10 here, gentlemen, right? Because you're straddling rocks in a raging river trying to fight with daggers, Oh my God, this is fucking epic cinematic shit. It's
totally narratively dependent. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking, this steers the focus back between presenter and players at the table when they're narratively involved and invested in their characters and expressing their characters. It has a lot of weight. Like we said, when you were running up to Boethius, how you did that totally set the
scene. What our game allows is for our game to be more cinematic, not just how you get to express your character. How do you get to express the scene? So let's say we're in a fight in the mud, in the muck, right? And how Sam is defining the rain and the muck and this chaos, and this big guy turns around and grabs the spear from a peasant and pushes him away. And I say, he has set the movie scene. We're now in a movie in the rain, and Yami just kicks that dude back and right onto the spear, And we're actually now, we're not just being characters. We're defining the fight. We're defining this amazing cinematic scene that's going to be a melee between these two. It's a Game of Thrones moment where it's a one-on-one standoff. Big dude with sword, little dude with spear, and this is going to be an epic standoff in Game of Thrones where somebody's going to be dead at the end of that spear, right? Or arrested or whatever, right? So we're not just expressing our character. The player is free to not create the world, but the player is free to set the scene. I run up now that I realize, wait a second, I'm breathing better. I haven't breathed like this ever. I recognize the miracle that he cast by saying, because I can breathe, I run up to Boethius. I have told the story how I'm dragging ass, I'm coughing, I'm spluttering, I'm wheezing, I'm sick. I have cinematically expressed my character from day one. Now I'm expressing my character as an example of what happened when he was healed. So we are in a way not just characters in a story or chronicles. We are actually in a movie. We're actually in a way, without the trappings of talking about movie structure and nonsense, we're also defining these scenes that you would see if you were watching this in a show or in a movie. I turn you around and I say, dude, we have that conflict between two human beings. And I go my way and you go yours. It's this moment where we break. Players are free to do that, or players could just tell everything from their perspective, and it would work beautifully, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. We're afforded to do that, like the mind's eye at the table, the way we visually moving the scenes around, and they're alive and palpable for everybody at the table, and allow each other to feed off of each other while you're producing this. And you can't do that with all these meta stuff, slowing things down to the point that it doesn't have those moments of wait.
Yeah.
That it just leaves everybody, and then everything. Like none of us vanity is very much required. The way you interact, that you feed off of each other, and that's the kind of focus point we need. Like I said, the mechanics need to be so intuitively known. If you get mechanics that you have to research and it ain't just ingrained in how you play, and I ain't talking about like large learning curves are really like it's KISS, keep it simple, stupid. You don't want to get that deep to where you got to stop and you got to have the weight of the sword be measured in to see
but
how
you can
much
get that deep with the right table and the right culture of players. They can all be very deep role players that never leave character, that describe these third-person moments, describe these first-person moments. But you could also be the culture of play where it's very so my point is, I've said before, because it matters, what we say matters. It's not vanity. The mechanics itself may be a simple activation of the dice and a check to see if you succeeded in affecting your enemy. But like a fight scene, I was thinking, our game would allow Scott and I to narrate. Scott is presenting our game, and I'm a character, and we're in a fight. I'm in a fight, one-on-one, alone, in a back alley against, a formidable opponent. And Scott and I literally hot potato back and forth this epic description of our melee combat. Back and forth, this unbelievable. And if Scott because Scott imagines on a level I imagine on. So imagine these two people imagining this amazing hand-to-hand combat in the back alley. Imagine the great scenes of Bourne Identity, those hand fights, right? And you can do that in D&D, but then you roll the hit, etc. Well, in our game, when you say it, it matters. So I'm going to smack that hand away, and I'm going to drive my pin. I'm going to grab the pin up. So in a scene, I just say I'm going to pick up a pin off the desk, and like, okay, that means something. I have a pin in my hand now, right? And now he describes how he tries to punch me, and I say, well, and you roll the failure. I smack away his punch, drive his hand down, and I drive the pin into the back of his hand, causing a wound. And now he's got a fucking pencil jammed into the back of his hand, right? So what I say matters, and he acknowledges that by saying, you did say you picked up a pencil. Boom, right? So now I've created a weapon out of a pencil in this amazing fight, right? Or James Bond fights on a train, right? Sherlock Holmes, how he narrates how he's going to break this big fucker down to end the fight, right? And now we roll a 12, and all of that happens, Jason, as you pre-narrated how you were going to do this, bring the guy down with a shot to the neck, and he's down, and I rolled a 12, fight's over, right?
Well, see, that back and forth, the push and pull of that back and forth between presenter and player, that's what I'm saying. You're allowed to do that because the rules and the mechanics behind it, rather, are the fact that it's very intuitive. Whenever you do something, you say, oh, crap. I know from your competency level of your abilities. Like if you're a fighter and you got a two-body and you're very agile and this whole history of you play and you go, I can see that happening. There's really no roles to be incurred.
Correct.
And then when you reach a certain thing, you say, I'm going to backflip it. Or, I'm going to try to reach this. And you two have been fighting away from that, and you're over in the other corner of the room. You're going to make a bad dash without getting hit.
Yep.
Oh, that's going to be a little bit difficult. It's immediately like you both know. Everybody around the table knows, and then he goes, okay, roll, and let's see if you do this.
So what does our game do differently than all other role-playing games? We don't say, well, feel free to narrate it any way you want, but it's all going to come down to hit roll. Or use move sets, use terminology like moves to do it, and then it's still going to come down to a particular roll, right? Our game is saying what you say is a rule. Yep. When I say I'm grabbing up, you've described we're in a graveyard, right? And we're in this moment where I end up in a fight in the graveyard with gravediggers. And I say, I reach down and grab up one of the shovels. dude, it's a graveyard. They're grave diggers. Trust me, there's a fucking shovel around here, right?
Yeah.
Nobody questions that, dude. Now you now have a weapon in your hand. You now have a shovel in it. So when you speak it, it becomes true.
Yes.
But it doesn't change the DV. But now you've got the shovel in your hand, right? And you describe how you're gonna swing this shovel flat face down upon the top of his head, and you roll a 1. Well, you've given me a shovel. I say, well, okay, that's critical failure. As you bring that shovel down, he grabs the end of it, snaps it in two, and comes underneath and drives this sharp end of the shovel into your fucking ribs, right? You've now put a weapon in the scene for both of us, right?
See that liberty of presenter and player to impart information back and forth, and to get this swell of activity, and then the way it's interpreted by both, they both feel when you feel it as a player when you're going to try to do something that's a little bit hard or difficult or more isn't a given. Per your abilities, your natural abilities is what has been set so far. And then the presenter knows this, is playing the NPC or whatever, and he goes, okay, roll. It's just a simple roll. Let's see if this actually happens. And you say, because you're doing it. If you're running across and I'm going to try to get to something, and I know I'm putting my cheese in the wind, I could be hit. And let's see if I can do it before he does that. And then I roll and I say, no, you fail. You fail. And then he just picks up immediately and says, okay, he hits you in the back as you're running with that shovel that you just dropped going after something else, what I mean, or whatever.
Well, or
then,
but the DV is set at a certain level, and you say you're picking up a shovel. I don't have to even now. The shovel I can, as a presenter, say, okay, the DV just got easier for you. You're now armed against the gravedigger who has nothing. So you just say, I grab up one of the shovels sitting around. It's like, okay, now the gravedigger, the DV to beat the gravedigger in melee just dropped 2 points. Instead of doing it, I can use everything.
Well, that's the beauty of it. Everything that was narratively talked about it in the situation. Right. It's a situational move of DV, and it is like a gear move of the DV. If you got a shovel in your hand, you go, okay, this is gonna tilt the odds in your favor. So it also, that's just representative by naturally where the DV is set now for any kind of activity, or it could be a given. Yeah, it could be a given. If a guy's laying down unconscious and you're going to smack a shovel upside his head, you ain't going to be rolling to see if you can hit. Okay, you just did that. Yeah. That's an obvious thing.
No, and that's why it works. Possible. Because if a player tells me a narrative action, if he describes an action that is narratively not only rich, but narratively, dude, I'm not even going to counter that. That happens.
Yeah.
But now he responds by looking around, and he smiles, and you see he has no teeth, and he smiles as he reaches down and picks up an old sword from the fucking grave that he's just dug up, and he stands there now with a smile on his face, holding awkwardly a sword he clearly has no skill with, and I've just evened the DV again, right? By just narrating how he grabs up a sword that's in the crypt, that's in the grave, but now we haven't defined the weapons, right? I could lower the DV. But because you have a weapon, and I've evened the DV by grabbing up an old sword. Narratively, whether that sword crumbles to bits the first time he makes a critical success or critical fail roll, or just a failed roll or whatever, the sword could be a crappy old, So all of this stuff becomes narratively true and rich, and there's an ebb and flow to how we exchange the story. But as you said, if your guy's body's a 4 and you say, I'm going to grab her and restrain her and throw her in the back of the wagon, there's no roll here.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Right. You eliminate that, and it keeps the narrative flow palpably alive for everybody to say, like, I can see all this happening at the table. And that's what you're invested in. You're not invested in, well, let's see if this can happen. What kind of a sword do you have? And let me see how much it will inflict. It's too much meta talk. It's too much stop and go.
And here's the irony, and you're right. So simulationists say, dude, you can't use a two-handed sword. And so what ends up happening when they're playing a simulation of the game, and the DM says, how are you going to hit this goblin in this 3-foot wide cavern that you're ducked in? With my two-handed sword. No, you're not. You're not going to use your two-handed sword. The rules state it's too big for this area. We all know I can use a two-handed sword in a 3-foot fucking corridor. How? By thrusting it forward, point straight, and poking with it. I don't have to swing the fucking thing. I can use it as a goddamn spear, right?
Yeah.
And everybody, if everybody's agreed we're in this space, somebody's going to say, they'll literally describe it. I drop my sword level to his belly button, and I'm driving my two-handed sword down this passage like full speed, like a fucking sword. And we all go, holy shit, he's still using this two-handed sword, but he's using it differently. That's still we're still simulating the situation. We're in a 3-foot cavern. He's using it this particular way.
Yeah,
D&D says, well, you can't do that. Wait a minute. We can all be problem solvers. We can all narrate a way something can work instead of saying no, or instead of saying
exactly. Don't limit me. Don't break out the scales.
But you better narrate how you're using that sword that makes sense to everybody sitting at the table.
Exactly, and you got to trust people to do that without breaking, because they're invested in the scene. Everybody is at the table, and they want to have this make logical sense. That's why I said you're not going to go outside the confines of what it is. I'm not going to say, I conjure a dragon to attack you, or what. Everybody be like, what? This isn't. This isn't
right. And some guys would say, as an environmental fighter, which is how I would be. I would say, okay, I drop my sword in the mud, and I'm in this tight cavern. I'm going to reach out, grab this goblin by the chin, and I'm going to bash his fucking head into both walls, right? Because I'm in this narrow space. I want to pick him up, bash him back and forth, right? And so I'm narrating how I'm going to use the cavern itself as a weapon against this little goblin, right?
Well, see, it gives you the creative freedom to do that and to envision it happening. Right. And that's what ultimately stays in your mind at the end of the game. It's not about what you're rolling or if you had this or that. It's about the scene, what transpired during this whole thing. That's why they're more alive. Like you said, Jenny said when she watched it, it was just flowing.
And we never, and she said it was easy to watch because there is zero game talk. There was zero mechanical talk.
Yeah.
Everybody was sharing an actual narrative space. We weren't telling a story. We were sharing a narrative space, and because we would yes but, if you said, hey, it's raining, somebody else at the table would acknowledge the rain. Yes, and it's the mud around my boots. And so nobody's breaking this atmosphere that we've agreed upon, right?
And everybody's a player, and the only thing different, asymmetrical, is the presenter uses DVs and represents in character the world.
Yep.
That's what I was saying earlier on the video about the diegesis and mimesis.
Yep.
You're playing from that perspective of the mimesis, that you're in the headspace, but the diegesis is the narrative description of the world that you're interfacing with.
Yeah, the diorama. Everything we say in third person is the diorama, the diegesis. And then when I go into first person to narrate my motives and describe my actions and to actually take action, it becomes mimesis.
Yeah, but we don't need to be non-diegetic for half the game, describing the mechanics behind it. Correct. Because we don't have that much mechanics to facilitate something that is naturally intuitive for everybody if given the right and to be accountable for their own characters within the diegetic space that they're just describing. Yep. That's the trust. If I was a GM and I'm looking at you going, you can't use that sword because of this and that, that's like I'm the gatekeeper to the narrative or whatever.
And in our game, you don't have to in our game. In our game, I say, okay, you're using this two-handed sword, in the cavern, the DV goes up, right? Because and even if you're saying you're going to drop it down, I might just improve. I might just kick the DV up and say it's not that you can't use the two-handed sword here, but it's going to be awkward, and the DV is just going to step up a notch because, right? And I don't have to even say that out loud. I just say, okay, what you say is bond. If you say you're doing it, you're doing it. Now let's roll to see if you affect him, right? So when you say I lower my shield and I start running down this corridor and I'm going to drive my sword right through the stomach of this goblin, I say, okay, roll. I've leveled the D. I've actually made the DV harder without saying a word.
It's intuitive. It's intuitively.
Because you've described that you're changing how you're using your sword, and you're going to run directly at them down this narrow passage. There's a lot of shit that makes this a hard sell, right? But I don't have to say no. I don't have to say wow. I don't have to say +2. I just say, okay, make that combat roll, Joe. And if you fail, I just describe how in the clumsiness of this dark cavern with you trying to run, you bang into the wall, you stumble, you trip, and you end up coming up short as the goblin just steps out of the way of your clumsy attack, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Our game is freeing. But
And you
our
keep
game
going.
has mechanics. I mean, this idea that there's nothing there to support everything we do. 100% there is. What there's not there is telling you how to do it. We're not telling you how to say it, how to do it, how to play it. The mechanics are there to support the presenter to be naive and have flexibility to account for players who are very creative or who lack being imaginative.
Yeah.
So a player says he's going to do something. I'm going to dive out of the boat and get away from this creature, and I'm going, okay, you're a warrior. You're wearing mail. You got a shield. You got a sword on your back. I'm going to say, okay, you're going to swim. I adjust the DV way up. And I describe as they hit the water how they're sinking, and they're trying to swim away from the monster in the boat, but you're sinking and you realize your armor and your sword, all your shit's too heavy because you fell to swim shit, right? But the DV roll went up for him diving in the water to swim to shore, and as I describe how he's not getting there, and you suffer a fatigue wound here, and he starts manifestly stripping off his gear and shit. Now you'll automatically get the short of that on the roll, but you've taken a batter and you've stripped off all your gear. Right? But that happened because of the situation you said you did. You didn't say, I'm throwing my shield, my sword onto the boat, and I'm diving in. I'm going to chance it with my armor on that I can make it to shore because you've left out details. I might pump that DV up, and I'm going to be the one to remind you of those details. You better get your fucking armor off. You're drowning, and you're sinking to the bottom of the river. And that would cue them to narratively lose the gear, which now becomes a game mechanic that they're on shore, but they now have no armor and no weapons, but they're alive, right?
Yeah, everything's situational.
Circumstantial.
It isn't that we don't have mechanics, but I don't. Mechanics need to be, like I said,
organic.
I've said before.
You and I talked about this years ago. How we want to play organic games. This is organic. Everything comes from what they describe, the actions we take, and the world around them, and it creates organic play. Organic narrative, organic stories, organic. You plant the seed grows.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, and it was from a video a few years ago. I thought it was funny. I think Mike Merles and Adam Colball and what's the guy who does that really excitable guy with the beard, that YouTuber. But anyway, they're sitting there and they're all talking, having this 4-way talk. And why I'm mentioning this is because a question came up about the most memorable time that they had. And they just lit up and was each individually talking about this unscripted moment that occurred that wasn't parsed out or that they had to go through a scene or do this, whatever. It was like, I guess it was a modern thing where they was on the hood of the card, something totally just that was not expected transpired. And that's what we're doing. We're living in that space. We're not trying to herd people as a GM down a certain linear path. We're saying, like, where do you want to go?
Yeah, what they're describing is these amazing moments happened despite the game they were playing, despite the mechanics they were using.
Exactly. That's
our game is saying all
Let's
of these.
Focus on that and stay in that.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
And not in spite of mechanics. The mechanics are there to support all those, right? So guys are like, man, dude, I never saw that coming. You didn't see it coming because you've been playing this narrow windowed game that
and then
when something like that happens, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Well, why? Because it happened despite the narrow way in which you play or the game or the narrow way in which the game allows this stuff to happen. Right. And I get it. Games are designed purposely for a certain way. Like Doom, again, we talked about Doom and Threat in the 2D20 games. It's not that that's better. It's to give those players and that GM a different game experience. You need to have the structure of how Doom is used and how Doom affects play, and it changes why we're playing that game, why we buy that rule book, why we read that rule book, why we all agree we're going to play those sets of rules, and we're going to experience what that feels like. There's nothing wrong with that. It is gaming, and it's wonderful. It's like a board game. We're going to play Monopoly. These are the rules for Monopoly. You're going to find out whether you like Monopoly or not. You're going to find out whether you're any good at Monopoly or not. But now next week we're playing Risk, completely different game. We don't play Risk like Monopoly. We don't play Monopoly like Risk or whatever games you want to use. So that's okay. We understand the realities of game design and game mechanics. Right? What we're saying is if you want true simplicity, you want true freedom and agency, and you want to have these kind of cinematic-rich, character-rich, that lead to a narrative that leads to a story in which your characters and who they are as people matter more than who they are as character sheets, who they are as attributes. Hey, dude, man, I'm finally level 4. My lightning blast in D&D 5e does 46 plus 6 damage. Yeah, dude, fuck. Okay, it's a fucking war game. Okay, good for you. You're level 4. You now do more damage. I don't give a fuck about that shit. Could care less. Man, when I get to level 12, dude, I'm going to get that spell, blah, 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 and I can't wait. It's like, dude, you're playing for level 12. What about now? You're level fucking 2. You're level 2 in the tavern talking to a goblin.
12.
I mean, and you're talking about what you're going to do at level 12? Holy shit, dude. Good luck. It's like, be here, be in the now, be in the moment. Awareness, right? Have this awareness, have this in the moment. The way of the Tao, right? The way of the thing. Get in it and feel it and be there. Be your character. Be in these situations. And acknowledge what everybody else says because it's richer immersion. When Dell says something, my character then reiterates it by saying, as I watch the guard fall at the hands of something Dell's character's done or said, I'm acknowledging that my character from his perspective sees this happen, and it enriches and it confirms that this isn't just talk. This isn't just vanity. It is now the new paradigm for the next decision. The paradigm is forever evolving and changing. And every time we say something and the action changes, the paradigm evolves. Now it may be a harder DV for me to get in because there's a guard laying dead in the gates. Or it could be easier because there's so much shit going on that I can just kind of slide in the gate.
You got to be accountable.
Because of what you did. And the naive presenter, he can imagine that this causes the guards to panic. And they pull up swords and shields and everything, and they allow you to come in, but they're now worried they're going to be overrun at the gate. And it makes it that much harder for my character to get in. Because he envisions the response from the crowd as a naive narrator a particular way, and it becomes Bond. It becomes the new DV. And how he describes it should tell me the DV is way up here. So I'm going, fuck, how am I going to get past this difficulty? Without saying it. He doesn't say, okay, good for Dell. Dell, you're in, but because of the response, the DV now is 12. Good luck, Jason, getting past the guards, right? He just in his mind says, okay, if Jason tries to just walk up and talk to the guards and get in, the DV value is going to be like 12 for him to trick these guys.
That's what I meant at the table. Everybody can feel this. It's palpable. You know when you're about to do something that this is going to be more of a mountain than a molehill.
Yep.
And it's just known throughout the table. Okay, well, it's going to be bumped up. You don't have to sit there.
Yep.
We're going to set it here. You got to roll against here. It's all intuitively known. Mm-hmm. Rule, the difficulty level. Mm-hmm. This will even fold over. What you do has consequences in the world that even folds over into the next seed chart for the next game.
Correct.
And you leave this weight behind you, and you trigger certain things in the world. It's not that I have to tell you what you're triggering, but it's like self-evident around the table.
Sure.
Oh, crap. Once old boy finds out about this, once this noble finds out that you betrayed him by telling him whatever, if that word ever gets out, then it's going to hit the fan.
Yep.
So you're living in that world that you're threatening other things around you, and it can come back to bite you. So you're sometimes laying traps against yourself. That's what's so beautiful. You don't really need, if it's not intuitive, mechanically, that's ultimately to get back to what, like, if we try to quantify things to keep people's focus on what they can do, what's allowed from the list of possibilities. It restricts them coming up with things that are like me coming up with Boethius, and both of y'all was like, oh my God, it's a Falcone, man. What the hell? And then from my point of view,
you did.
But no, you're not playing a priest.
You did reference that you grew up under the yoke of Falcone before Brother Aethelwald even showed up. So you had you had made it clear that your character. We don't have to know how you feel about that, but you made it clear, I think, in session 2 or whatever, that your character knows Falcone and is right. So it wasn't like it just came out of nowhere. I mean, there was you had foreshadowed your character at least knew who he was, and now we didn't know what that meant to you, right? And so nothing was just out of nowhere, right? Uh,
Correct. There was little moments too where in the narrative. That's what I mean. If somebody's expressing their character,
if
they're
you're
going to
paying
do it like
attention, and I was, you talked about how you weren't sold on Brother Aethelwald, but you'll do what you got to do because the Lord has said, go find Brother Aethelwald. You made that
you
clear.
know.
You also made it clear that you grew up under Falcone, right? So I was listening. I was paying attention to who you
Yeah.
defined. It may never matter. It may never come up, but I was paying attention. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like the pantomime I put on of the club foot or whatever, and the healing.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about using the dagger otherwise, but the healing. Whenever I first asked the young lord if I could go up there, and he handed me the Aethelwald's shred of, which you notice I never even used it since
Correct.
then, right? I tucked it away.
Ironically, if you're paying close attention, you are
expressing that character.
You are expressing an authentic character but again, it's circumstantial. That could leave me saying, either he's wary of this being a legitimate relic, or he's wary of it being Brother Aethelwald's relic. I don't know how you actually feel, but I could perceive it multiple ways. Later, we'll find out, whether it was a legitimate relic or not, it had something to do with Brother Aethelwald. That's now clear to me. It's clear to the audience watching the TV show or the movie, right? But there's a mystery to your reaction to it originally. That mystery starts to be unveiled as we learn that your character is allied with Falcone, not with Brother Aethelwald. But we don't know that when we first meet your character, right? And you may not know it. I think you probably, like me, you have a good idea who your character is when you start the game. I had motivation. My character was there for Thane. I don't have to make it clear at the beginning of the sessions. I don't have to say to everybody, okay, guys, here's my character, and he's here to be healed. I know that. I know what would motivate him to go to shithole Dredgewater because he's already a successful merchant. Why the fuck would I think I'm going to build any more value in Dredgewater? I'm clearly there to be healed, right?
Yeah.
It becomes obvious when I express it ultimately in game. But so I go into a session understanding a little bit about who my character is. I have no idea how the world's going to change my character, if he changes at all, or how my character is going to change the world itself. So either I'm going to change the world around me, or I'm going to be changed by the world around me, right?
Exactly.
And this is another. Right. And all of this is part of the reality of story and of narrative and of film and of television. Characters have to either change, or somebody around them has to change, or the situation has to change, right? That's just how we perceive storytelling. So if you have a main character that can't change, there has to be another character around them that does change. And if the main character doesn't change, generally the world itself is going to have to change, right? Or the character will cease to exist. And those are like your three kind of avenues of how a story goes when you're watching a movie or you're watching right? If you're watching a main character that is not going to change, he's either going to affect change upon the world around him or he's going to die. Pretty basic.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because he ain't going to change. Then there's the protagonist that changes with the world or changes because of the world.
Yeah.
Right? And lives or could die as the American tragedy, right? I realize when it's too late that this is who I am, this is what I want to be, but the tragedy is I die because of it, right? Right?
Exactly.
And these are truisms, and when you play role-playing should hopefully you see those things organically occur. They're not planned. Players aren't sitting around going, "Oh, I can't wait for my character to kill the king." And no. You're just playing characters, and you don't even know if you're ever going to meet the king. But you're in a situation where, oh my God, nobody saw it coming that you would ultimately poison the king, right? And it's an organic character that plays organically. And when you reflect back on the Chronicles, you say, who would have thunk that Jason's character at the beginning would become the man who would strangle the king behind the curtain at the end of the Chronicles?
You watch that metamorphosis happen in some different characters, but what we're trying to do is like don't follow and have changes upon a linear path. But you need to follow what's important to the characters and the players that are vested that are at the table that want to enjoy themselves. And so a lot of people say like something shiny. I need to keep them on the main course here.
Right. Don't complicit.
I want to go where I want to go.
And that's the failure of modern game systems. I don't need modern, all game systems. You have to find a way as a DM or a GM to compel them to be interested in the thing you're doing or railroad them either way. right? And our game is, again, we talk about design.
Yeah.
We designed it to say to the presenter, to the GM, be naive. We don't. If you decide the king's fate before the campaign starts, then there will be a player who maybe somehow, some way gets in front of the king and ends up being their fate that they're going to kill the king. It wasn't planned, right? But because you pre-decided the king was going to win the war against the elves, the players are going to play a role in that, then we don't actually get to see the player's agency as they evolve into an elf who ends up behind the curtain with the king and says, I can't let this bastard reign. I get it.
Exactly.
And
So
I strike down the king. But the GM won't allow it because they've got this grand fucking desire in their head.
You can't do that. We're going to have retcon that and bring you back and get back on track here.
Right.
So a lot of it's just like herding cattle, which isn't fun in a lot of respects for the players.
Well, it becomes a game. It becomes a game, and everybody takes a turn. Everybody rolls the dice. And I was thinking about this too. What's the first thing people say to you when they play at a game in D&D? If you've ever had newbies play with you, first thing they say when you say, "What would you like?" They go, "Well, what can I do?" Okay, well, we're in a fight with goblins. This is going to be a fight to the death, Joe. You can use your sword and your shield in melee.
Your own adventure book,
right? So what is the counsel that a DM gives that guy? Well, Joe, you're a fighter. You have a sword and a shield. So your best avenue for fighting this goblin is melee. That's what you want to do mechanically in the game. Is going to melee. And then the player. Then there's the other thing they always say. Well, how do I go about that? Well, you swing your sword, roll your die 20, and if you hit, we'll roll damage, and right. But how can I go about saying that? Well, you can say anything you want. So this is how we counsel new players, right? Well, you have a sword and a shield. You're in combat with goblins. You don't really have a ranged weapon here. You don't have magic. You could flee. You could try to negotiate, or ultimately use your weapon and shield to try to kill the goblin. That's what you're going to do. How you go about saying that, that's all up to you. But that clumsy time that you play with players that have never played before, that conversation that we've all had umpteens, millions of times with new players, instantly tells you what they're really doing. How they narrate it is vain. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But what they're really doing is playing a fighter with a sword and a shield, and now we're in combat. Or you can go through the door, or you can't pick the lock. You're not the thief. You can't. So how those conversations go with a newbie instantly tells you that what kind of game they're playing, and that game is decided by the mechanics. It's decided by the fucking rule book. I don't care how you and your buddies after 40 years play D&D. Dude, that's all you can do. That's all you are doing. How you impart characters and role play and make this, and how your GM tells these amazing detailed narrative descriptions of the room, well, that's great for you and your table. But when it comes down to it, if you want to know the truth of a game, right? Imagine that conversation with the first kid at your table, the first person at your table that says, "What can I do?" Yeah. You're going to describe the rules to them, and the rules are going to dictate what they can do. Our game, when that guy says, "What can I do?" What do you mean? What can you do? Who are you? Tell me who you are and what you're doing. You're in downtown Dredgewater. I've told you what's going on around you. You tell me. You can do anything you want.
You lead the dance. Mm-hmm. It's not me forcing you along which way.
The guy says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to take flight and I'm going to fly up to about 1,000 feet and get an overview of the whole region." And I say, "Wow, interesting. That's a mind check. Make a roll." And he makes a roll. He says, 10. And I say, "You're standing in the streets and you're like trying to get off the ground. And people are watching you. You look kind of foolish. People are starting to huddle around you watching this peasant in the street trying to take flight." I didn't say, "No, dude, get your shit together. You can't fly."
Yeah.
No, you failed because the DV was at 14. You rolled a 10. Your mind is a 0. I don't have to go into the mechanics of that. I say, you're standing there trying to take off flight and you're not getting off the ground. And now people are crowded around you going, "What's wrong with this kid? Witch! Witch!" Now you've got people screaming, "Witch! Crazy, this kid's nuts." What are you going to do? What do you mean I can't fly? Dude, you can't fly. You're trying. You want to try again? How are you going to do that? Right? And so I keep them grounded by saying, you didn't take flight. Yeah. And they would go, "Oh yeah, right, we're in the real world. I'm not Superman." But I'm going to try again. I'm going to pray, God, let me take flight. Make a roll. Spirit check. Still DV14. Guy's got a 0 spirit. He's a peasant. He put it all in body, right? And he fails miserably. And now they're huddled around him because they've heard him mumble the prayers of God off his lips to fly. Now they're crying to string him up as a blaspheming.
Yeah, there are consequences to your actions, so it keeps you in the world itself. That keeps
my
you
advice
balanced.
to you now, Skip: stop trying to fly. As the peasants are about to string you up for heretical blasphemy.
I know.
And now we're playing an organic game where I haven't said you can't do that. I haven't said that it's not in the rules. We haven't had to define magic in our game.
Yeah.
And he begins to learn real quick that not only is it very difficult to do what he wants to do, fly, and get an overview of the whole world. He's now, the consequences of his foolhardy bullshit in the middle of the street is drawing a crowd. And now, right, welcome to organic, legitimate play where mechanics matter. But I haven't directed any of it as a naive narrator. I'm going, cool. If somehow he had minded to, and I've said it at 14 and he rolled a 12 critical, I would say you take a flight and you go, and now you can see the river and I can describe the map to him. And now what? Right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, holy shit, people are going to witness this kid take flight, and it's going to be a world changing of view. Yeah. That's a repute point. How do you want to spend it? Dude, I'm putting it back on my mind. I'm now realizing I have this magical power.
Yeah.
Fucking A. We now have Merlin. We've had the birth of a peasant Merlin with a mind of 3, right? And he's gotten a repute because the world has just witnessed him take flight. It doesn't break the game. It changes the world, right?
Yeah,
but it doesn't change it for everybody. It changes it just for his character. And now his character is capable of magic. Now what? Well, fuck, I'm gonna land. Oh, let's make another one of those tough checks. 14, he rolls a 2, 1,000 feet drop. Yeah. You are pulverized into a smudge of shit as people scatter as your body plummets 1,000 feet to the earth. Well, you pushed your luck as Merlin. You went a little too far with that first bit of magic. It was nice knowing you. You earned a repute, but you're now a puddle of smudge in the muddy streets of Dredgewater. And they're going to tell tales of this day that a kid flew 1,000 feet in the air and then fell to his death. And they would learn. That player would go, okay, there's consequences to everything I do. Fuck, can I make another character? Let's go again.
The mechanics are intuitively and readily known by everybody around the table. You know when the presenter is going to set a high difficulty because it's simply based on what you're trying to do. So it doesn't inhibit the narrative interaction between player, presenter, and other players. Everything can just happen, and that way everybody gets a basis of like how difficulty or what you're trying to do that isn't plausible or more so probable. And that's the beauty of it. None of it hinders that play and natural, and you can focus on character development and interaction with the world. And the presenter needs that too because he's
naive.
He's naive.
And because we demand, our game does something that no other game does. We demand that the GM only knows what we know, and he only knows a couple of hidden traits. What's the real dilemma in the world that they really are going to be dealing with that they haven't yet known or figured out or learned, and then there's these random seeds that are going to just show up, and then everything they do and everything I do and everything we share becomes real world stuff. It all builds upon this mat, this beautiful sculpture that we're sculpting, right? And in reality, you need to be naive for players to have legitimate agency.
Yep, and things that are birthed out of that. Naivete is moments that I throw back to like the guys sitting around on that 4-way chat, and they're each remembering these insane moments that happened that wasn't scripted at all, that was just kind of sideways, So this is the liberty. It's liberation is what we're dealing with here in role play, and to get to that satisfying depth of character development and interaction that you remember more so than slogging through something that you are forced along a certain path.
Yeah.
And I know that's a linear thing. I know that there's hex crawls and stuff like that, but we're not even dealing with that. We're dealing with free expression of character.
Yeah.
And delving into the psyches of characters.
In a world that is established as a pseudo-historical low fantasy, low magic example of the Dark Ages. And we've given you a town with some NPCs. We've given you some structure, so everybody should enter the game understanding where we all have that much omniscience.
Yes.
Right? You're a peasant in Dredgewater, but you do know the sheriff. You do know the reeve, because it's in the book. You can read it in the book. You know it. You do know who the King of London is. You've never been to London, but you know it's King whatever, right? And because this is all given to the players. If they want to know it, it becomes something that empowers the players to feel part of the world. Now, none of us know outside. I mean, the presenter will have some sense of what's happening in the world right now that is affecting the world that the players are probably going to be affected by, right? So those things matter. So the gist of this conversation was not meant to be this conversation, but it's been a fantastic conversation. It is. So I'll cut to the chase. Do we leave words of power in and make them an optional rule? Do we leave the words of power in and make them more vague? Or do we leave the words of power in and leave them implied as a structured paradigm for how you utilize words of power? I'm inclined to remove reference to words of power.
Yeah, I'm inclined to remove anything that tries to quantify it. What I did, if you read my edit, and I still use the word of power, but we can axe that. But it's essentially
I'm thinking we may need it just to remind people how they utilize those things. But they would all be examples, not so boasting is an example of how you would use prestige to.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier.
Making them
the italicized thing. But I wrote down examples, which is what Anthony pointed out.
I haven't seen that, so you're going to want to show that because I haven't seen that. You're going to want to email that to me. I haven't seen that. Okay.
Yeah, I sent it back to Brian, but also I thought I copied you on it.
CC. Did you? Oh well, look. Okay.
It was a response or reply to what he said. I'll double check and then make sure it gets to you.
Okay.
But essentially, what I did and what I tried to do with it was just elaborate on the concept of how that we take the root attribute and apply them example wise, like I said, expound it out beyond the supernatural or the like alchemical.
Right.
But like when you're using intimidation, or if you're trying to boast, or if you're trying to give whatever you're doing, but essentially we're on the same page here. I think. I
love it. I love it.
Yeah,
and I love it. And I love Mark's work, and I love what it means mechanically.
Yeah.
To a game that wants to actually define the limitations of the use of words of power, right?
Yeah.
And again, if we want to make Dark Age of Man a more grounded, low fantasy, low magic, and we want words of power to be how Mark wrote them, and Mark wrote them with certain assumptions that are true of Dark Age of Man. This is a grounded, pseudo-historical, low fantasy, low magic setting and system, in which, though, people are superstitious and words have great power, whether there's actual magic behind them or not. I curse you, the witch, right? I mean, this
exactly.
People are affected by it because they actually believe it. They believe in it, therefore they're affected by it. And that's where Mark wrote Words of Power for those conversations and for that baseline of what Dark Age of Man is. And so I see it there and I want it there, but at the same time I'm like, yes, but Dark Age of Man, I think maybe it may be less rigid in its historical want to be too low fantasy, too grounded, right? I don't know. So I'm thinking we have it in there with examples as an optional.
What you just said there about trying to quantify the words of power, like if somebody has a fear of, like you can say something and it's still impactful for the people listening to it as they're superstitious or whatever. But see, to me, that's just naturally, intuitively known in the setting to a certain degree that it's used as, like, whenever somebody feels they pass the roll, and then the presenter would go, okay, well, the people's quavering when you made this announcement that they're cursed because they're superstitious.
Correct.
So
the presenter should be taking into account
I'm just saying,
if a player says it, they're clearly trying to achieve some action. They're clearly trying to achieve an effect upon the player, the NPCs of the world. So the presenter, if he succeeds that check, which is a prestige check or a mind check or a spirit check, whatever it is, against the peasants to make them run for cover because they appear right. They're attempting to change the scene, attempting to change the situation. The presenter should be able to recognize how they're doing it by what they say they're going to do, and the presenter sets a DV and they make a check, and then the presenter would then give an example of how they've turned and said, "Witch," and they're coming after you now because you failed miserably your check, or they all run for cover screaming "Witch." But you're now standing alone in the streets of Dredgewater with this poor woman hanging in the stocks that they were trying to burn. What do you want to do now? Well, I'm going to get her out of the stocks, and we're running for the hills. But at least I scared the peasants away, which is my goal. My goal is to scare the peasants away.
Yeah, you're
all
exactly
of that's
right.
represented by the actual events without defining it as a
exactly. That's what I'm saying. The game that we're trying to. All right, this is where I wanted to tie into what I wrote down was basically saying how this things work. The only thing that expanded for me was like, this works in all basically generally with the attributes, how you call it a root attribute of what's pertinently salient for what you're trying to accomplish through descriptive narrative, not through a I'm going to use boast, but just let it flow out of your character and say, this is what I'm attempting to do.
This is part of what I talked about earlier with D&D. Exactly. So what happens in D&D when a player says they're a cleric and they say, I'm gonna go over to Joe and I'm gonna heal Joe's hit points? What does the GM say? The DM say? The DM says, well, you're a cleric. Go ahead and make your heal spell check. Okay, or go ahead and make your heal roll and that's how much you expect because you're a cleric, Joe. You're healing with a heal spell. Correct? Do you have cure light wounds?
Now you can roll.
Right. But they narrate it. I'm going to go over and I'm going to cure Bill's wounds. I want to get his hit points up. Right? I don't care how they say it, formally or informally. But the DM would say, "Oh, you're using cure light wounds? Yes, I am. Okay, boom. Okay." A game that has binding wounds, and I'm a fighter, and I go over and I'm gonna work on Bill's wounds. The DM would say, "Oh, you're binding wounds." Yes, I'm binding wounds. Okay, boom, make a roll. So everything they say narratively, there has to be a mechanic to support what they're doing. If not, it's vain. It's irrelevant. I'm going over to work on Joe. Well, that's nice. You work on Joe, and you get Joe to his feet, but there's no mechanical way for you because there's no binding wounds in this game. Good for you. What do most DMs do? Most of them tweak the rules. We'll give you a hit point back, Bill, because Joe tried to help you. You don't want to let it fall on the no mechanics. Our game again is saying if we put it in and call it curse, what ends up happening? The presenter goes, "Oh, you're cursing. Oh, so Bill, what you're doing is cursing the peasants." Oh, sure, yeah, if that's what it's called, I'm cursing the peasants. That ends up being the conversation because they're invoking a mechanic, and this ends up being why I ultimately have pulled back from playing new games, and I'm ultimately done with my experiments in new gaming because it always ends up being an adventure in trying out new mechanics. It always ends up being I'm a character playing a game, and I do something that the GM has to then say, "Oh, so you're doing okay. This is going to require a stress check, Jason, or right?" And so what I'm really doing is I'm just navigating different mechanics and different rules that the DM is going to say, "Oh, you're making a healing check here. Did you study your heal spell yesterday, Jason? The rules demand that." "Oh, no, I didn't." "Well, then you're not going to be able to do that." And our game is just removing all of that and letting a player say, "Hey, I'm going to go kneel down and help Joe." And I would say, "Okay, narrate how you're helping Joe." "Well, I'm going to look at his wounds and I'm going to doctor him a little bit and I'm going to clean him up with some of my wine or my water and I'm going to do whatever." And I'll say, "Okay, so he's moved down from conditioned. He's now moved from battered to fatigued." It's very simple. And they might have to make a check depending on how bad he is or what kind of wound it is. But it's all possible. It's all possible with either a recognition that what you say is true or, well, he's in pretty bad shape. He's dying. So we're going to have to make a check to bring him from dying to, whatever. Right.
Yeah. What's listed in those examples, like I said, it's already baked in intuitively in the system. We're doing that anyway.
Yeah.
We don't need to go a second layer and then try to quantify something because it stymies just expression.
Right.
And which totally, it takes a step back from what we're actually trying to In fact, when I wrote those, I was like, this is really just kind of describing, especially since
What we're
it was
already
out of the
doing.
time. Yeah. It's more of an intent, which led me to the thing of like, should we have an intent of play, like, or at least have these examples of basically what you're doing, and that's why I didn't know if you wrote it or he wrote or whatever.
The Words of Power, that was all written by Mark.
Yeah,
and I just put it in our book and formatted it to fit our book. The Words of Power.
Yeah, but
the original Words of Power was all Mark's written work.
Yeah, and I get where he's coming from, but
I do too. And it fit the original concept of low magic, and to constrain players so they understand this is low magic. Words of Power work because it limits flight. There is no Word of Power fly.
See, we don't.
There is no Word of Power fly, right? So that guy would never. And if you tried that, you would say, "Well, that's not a Word of Power. You can't fly, Bill." And Bill would say, "Oh, okay." So it just ends the guy saying, "I'm going to fly 1,000 feet in the air and get a bird's eye view of Dredgewater." I smile and say, "You are." Well, let's see that. Right?
The self-balancing, the peasant that flew up and fell. The game already self-balances, and that's why it's intuitive. It's intuitively beautiful because it doesn't require those extra levels of fences or gates to keep people in line.
Right, or it doesn't require the DM to say, "I'm sorry, there is no binding wounds here. If you're not a choleric and you don't have Cure Light Wounds memorized, you can't heal Bill." Wow. So Bill's got 1 hit point for the rest of the day? That's right. He needs 8 hours rest. That's the game. That's the game we're playing. Those are mechanics.
Yeah.
Right? And that's okay. But they end up being meta conversations about game and how the board game works, because D&D is a board game where you role play your avatar. But it's a board game. Do not be fooled under any circumstances if Dungeons and Dragons is not a board game, because all the mechanics make it a board game. It may be a deep and rich board game that doesn't demand maps and minis, but it's a board game. And it's a board game because if it ain't defined by mechanics, you really shouldn't do it. You really can't do it.
Exactly.
There is no binding wounds in this OSR, Bill. So the only way to get a hit point back, Bill, is for you guys to rest uninterrupted for 8 hours. Are you willing to do that in camp here? Okay, you are? Great. We're going to roll Wandering Monsters for the 8 turns it's going to take to get you there. Wandering Monster roll number 1. Wandering Monster roll number 2. Second hour of your camp goes unmolested. Hang in there, Joe. You might get your hit point. And that's stressful because in 8 rolls, there's bound to be a Wandering Monster that's going to interrupt his rest. And he's not going to get his fucking hit point. And that's tension. Yeah. That is a board game mechanic. But no DM actually runs it properly. None. I don't know a DM that's actually running D&D properly when they camp to heal, right?
No, it's the same way.
To memorize your spells, you need a night's rest. And if you don't get through the night, you don't memorize your spells. How much harder is D&D if you play it properly? It's lethal. It becomes nigh impossible if you play it right.
But I think if the rules aren't like intuitively grasped by people, they will naturally go after those and the rest of them.
Yep.
If they'll fall by the wayside.
Correct.
Right.
And why? So why does it happen? Why do we tweak the games? And why does the OSR rewrite the rules over and over and over? Because they're trying to get to the intuitive thing we all want to do anyway. Yeah, you guys get a good night's rest. You get a hit point back. Bill, you memorize your spells. So we end up homebrewing D&D, so it's not this cumbersome pain in the ass that we all intuitively, dude, we can get some rest, right? Come on. And we try to make D&D more organic and more comfortable. And what ends up happening? And then somebody says, hey, dude, the way I run D&D is so fucking awesome. I'm going to write my own OSR and share it with the world because I run D&D better than D&D was written. And indeed, that's why the OSR is popular, because people have said my homebrew is worth publishing. And I enjoy Bill's homebrew because it's got binding wounds in it. D&D doesn't have binding wounds in it. And so we all buy the OSR and we all try, and we're hoping that rule set does everything for us so we can play the D&D that we want to play without having to homebrew it because we're using this OSR. And in reality, as I've aged, as I've matured, as I've realized that when you play with people, even noobs who don't know how to play the game, they intuitively know how to pretend. They intuitively know how to declare action. They intuitively know what they would like to do. So let's strip away the rules that they don't fucking know. Bill says, I'd like to get that lock open on the maid quarters door. And I say, well, you're not a thief, Bill. you better find a thief. In our game, how are you going to do that? Well, what kind of lock is it? And then we have a conversation with the lock. And then he said, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay. I set the DV and I say, okay, let's make a roll here with your mind, because you very cleverly have figured out this lock, and you think you can figure out the contraption using a hairpin to pop this lock open. And I've set very quietly under the hood, as you like to say, the DV. And he rolls and he adds mine to it. And I say, you feel the lock pop open, and the lock, you can swing the ass into the lock around, and now you can pull that lock off, and voila, the door to the maid's chambers is open. Congratulations. Yeah. But you asked about the lock. I defined the lock. Then you talked about examining the lock, and then you said, I think I know how to do this. And then we make a mind check, and I set the DV to maybe a 2, because you've already done it. You've already worked it all out. Now it's a matter of, did you mechanically do it, right? So I set the DV at 2, and boom, it pops open for you, right? You didn't have to be a thief. You didn't have to be a thief, but you had to be a human being in a world examining the lock and dealing with the problem solving and the evaluation of the thing. Right.
That's like when you throw back to Sam, like whether he would do it or not. Now have it on the back end, like with me stabbing him, if it would be. This is totally up to the presenter about what you may set it as 2, or I may say like, okay, the lock just pops open without a roll.
That's right.
And then I would. You see what I'm saying? So
it's still a mechanic. It's still a mechanic.
Yeah.
Because they worked through the process of picking the lock verbally. It's still he mechanically examined the lock, and you explained it to him, and then he mechanically said, oh, so I can probably get a hairpin in there and wiggle it around and pop it loose. And you say, voila, congratulations. That was a mechanic, and you just described how you did it. And it's technically a mechanic.
Yeah, if the dude has a mind of 2, which we all end up playing our characters. If he's not a smart guy, he wouldn't even do that. So you play your character genuinely. But if he's approaching a situation where he's using his mind, and I look at it and I say, well, his mind's a 3 or his mind's a 2.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That kind of sets the bar mechanical competency marker that I know this is going to be difficult for. We don't need to roll. Yep. I just say it pops open, and then we go on from there. Yep. So there's still reference points that you have that are baked into the game that I can say, okay, I could glance. I know he's about a 2 here. I know that's his focus, proficiency-wise, in his character that we've been sitting there playing for this game session. That this is his speciality.
That's what he does.
And it's going to be it's not that big of a deal for you. It's not like he's approaching something that he's unwieldy with. Right. And then I have to say, roll that dice. Because, like I said, everybody at the table knows when somebody's doing outside of somebody's wheel. You're doing something outside of your wheelhouse. So you go like, oh, shit, he's going to try this.
Well, and it's all circumstantial. Works. Is the lock there to hold you into a cell? That's going to be tougher. It's going to be a check. Yeah. If the lock is on the outside of a door holding a young woman on the other side, it could just be barred. Yeah. To keep her locked in, the lock's on this side is probably a shitty little lock. It doesn't matter. It's keeping her from getting out. So, you just pop the lock off, take it off, or unbar the door. But if it's a lock keeping you into a cell, I'm going to make you make a check because it changes your chances of getting out of the cell, right? So it's also circumstantial. They wouldn't put a lock that's crap to lock you into a cell. But they might put a shitty lock on the outside of a door to keep some teenager locked in if they're a witch locked into their bedchamber. It could be a shitty lock, right?
Well, so circumstances drive organically. During play,
it's a makeshift lock there just to keep this girl locked in. Oh, dude, then I'm just going to take my dagger out and pop it off. Okay, lock off.
Yeah. It's really it's organically evolved situationally. That you just weigh and then it rolls. So that's how we play. As far as in the rule system, like I said, bonuses to fighters or whatever. I don't like to inhibit people or get them to chase down or with a mindset of like,
I don't want them to play. And I've said this before. I'm tired of it. Players playing toward mechanics. And they're playing toward mechanics because the game demands it. That's how the game functions. Or they're playing toward mechanics because it gives them a math advantage, a probability. And I talked about this in my last video. Demon Souls, the director of Demon Souls said, We do not want the game based on probability because everything comes down to math probability. So what button they mash is pointless if they don't have the sword that gives them the math advantage to beat this creature. We wanted the game to be they could beat creatures any number of ways, some of them with weapons and shields and just a dueling fight, some by tricking the creature into running off the edge of the cliff, whatever the case may be. And Demon Soul said, and I agree 100% even with tabletop gaming, if everything is reduced to probabilities, what are players doing? Dude, if I could get to level 4 as a fighter, I'd have a +4 AB. And now, man, I'm going to be hitting all these first and second level goblins and shit with a roll of 8. You know, it's all probabilities. It has nothing to do with how their character moves through the world. It has to do with how easy it's going to be to dispatch shitty enemies now. Right.
Well, I can zone out and I can play something like Torchlight or Diablo, and I know that I can just press the button and then think of whatever. But if I'm engaged strategically, like if I'm playing a Dark Souls type game, right, like I got action, then you know that the way your approach is and the distance you have, and all of a sudden you're gauging in a way that's more satisfying for you as to feel like you've overcome some situation.
And why is
it's not just you following prompts.
And why is that? Because there is emergent problem solving, as opposed to the real problem being the player saying, "How can I grind to get more powerful to beat this monster?" Exactly. So they spend their time figuring out how to grind to beat the math to beat the monster. In something like Demon Souls or Dark Souls, they encounter the creature and they learn from failures, or and they can still go about grinding to be strong enough to beat the creature without much thought. But it's going to maybe take them hours upon hours of grinding, right, to do it. But they can. It's up to them. Or they can get physically better at the fight, or they can recognize, dude, I'm never going to beat this thing with a sword and shield, but I can beat it. I've got to change my weapon set. Because I can beat it if I can roll and block with a shield, right? But I'm not going to beat it with a spear, right? And so the player, the emergent critical thinking problem solving is not limited to probabilities. It's limited to the player's actions, right? And what they want to, what motivates them to do, how they want to go about defeating the beast. And I want this to be my tabletop gaming too. The character and who he is or she is should be motivated by who they are and what they think they are, what they want to achieve. But at the same time, they're going to encounter conflicts in the world, and they're going to deal with them hopefully authentically, and they might begin to deal with them differently as their character changes and evolves. As my character becomes more spiritual now that he's been healed by Saint Aethelwald, he may start talking. He may start. I may become evangelical pilgrim of Saint Aethelwald, traveling around you're preaching Saint Aethelwald.
You're Saul of Tarsus right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whenever, like I said earlier, what's the difference between like a level 2 fighter that is going up against a 2-hit dice monster, or in a level 10 going up against a 10-hit dice monster? All they're doing is moving that golden carrot down one more, and you're on this loop.
And the mechanics are reduced to probabilities. And unfortunately, that is gaming generally, because whether it's a board game or not, the probabilities that I'm going to hit Boardwalk in Monopoly, well, it's 1 in 6, depending on where I'm at when I get on that side of the board. I go, okay, I got a 16% chance to roll the perfect number on this turn to get to Boardwalk. But there could be a 32% chance I'm going to jump over Boardwalk, and I got to go all the way around the table again before I can land on Boardwalk, right?
Yeah.
So it's a 16% probability on the die you're going to get the exact number you want. Always. Ironically, in Monopoly, it's always a 16.7% chance you're going to get the number you want. In every roll. That's probabilities. And most people play Monopoly have no fucking clue that it's always a 16.7% probability they're going to get the number they want, which means it's a 16.7 probability they're going to get the exact number they do not want. Go to jail. Right?
Let me tell you something. This is what introduced me into my gaming life. Not only, I totally get what we're talking about, Demon Souls, and the fact that if you're going to be engaged and immersed in play and have a deeper satisfaction other than just a loop grind, of feeling that you're brought up to a certain thing to where you have to engage and use your facilities to overcome something, and then it's like, yes, I did it. Okay, now we're doing that essentially with Dark Age of Man, that you really invested in your character and developing your character, and as his interaction with the world in real time, whether he's a merchant or whether he's a priest or whether he's a sellsword or whatever the hell he is, he engages in his own respect. Now, whenever we were talking that one day, we was talking about single player games, and I said, really, like, and this goes over into those topics gave me too, where there's a loop. I said, all you're doing is playing a solitary game. Your resource management, you're trying to get better at resource management, a certain percentage, and then the luck of the solitaire, whether it's dice or whether it's cards or whatever falling in your favor, there's a percentage of chance, and then you overcome it, right? And then you say, oh, I did it, because a lot of it has to do with like luck and what you're rolling and probabilities, like you're saying. You know, it's the same way of chasing that golden carrot. And then let's level up and replay this level. It's like the Donkey Kong, and then Donkey Kong level 2, and then you know what I mean? But it's your abilities to deal with it also go up. So it's like it's the same thing.
Right. It's called, and I'll say this until I die. It is Nash's equilibrium. Zero-sum gaming. Nash uses tic-tac-toe to prove gaming. Tic-tac-toe is zero-sum because I am not so stupid I will ever lose a game of tic-tac-toe to the most amazing intellect on the planet, because there's only so many choices for a guy to make a decision in tic-tac-toe, whether I go first, whether I go second, whether I'm X's, whether I'm O's, whether you go up, whether you go down, whether I go diagonal. You and I would play tic-tac-toe infinitely, and no one would ever win. Because that is Nash's equilibrium. That is the definition of a game. Don't confuse game with gamble. Dice coming into play becomes gambling, not game, right? So now we add strategies and we diversify. We take tic-tac-toe and say, yeah, but what if there was another layer and another layer and another layer? Now we've got 4 times gaming, right? We've got games that take tic-tac-toe and say, it's all still equal sum, but now we're getting so complicated that Dell might forget to reinforce his soldiers in Axis and Allies on that turn, and there's my advantage, right? Exactly. Or Dell is accruing a particular style and strategy before he wages a front in Axis and Allies. That's your strategy, but it's zero-sum. We're all equal. We all know the rules. We all know a strategy that we're going to attempt to impart. Whether you recognize my strategy and say, I know how to beat that strategy, I'll get to him on turn 12. He's an idiot, right? This fucker over here, that's dangerous what he's doing. But guess what? We all have an equal chance of succeeding depending on the game. So that is Nash's equilibrium. That is gaming. That is what a game means, right? Strategy in a game. So why is the Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Elden Ring, why are these games, Blood, why are these special? Because it's zero-sum gaming, and it's left up to me how I am going to approach the game. I could go right and wait through the easy guys time and time again until I level up and get a little stronger before I head left and deal with that fucking creature over there, right? Elden Ring in particular is an open world, and if I want to stay in the low-level areas and grind away until I get stronger and get more confidence, then I'll go up there and deal with that beast. But I can avoid that beast entirely by finding other avenues around it. But I can exercise a shit ton of strategies of how I want to develop my character, develop how I enjoy Elden Ring as an open world Demon Souls, right? Demon Souls is not open world. It is maze-like maps with secret passages like Dark Souls, etc. But Elden Ring is open world, and if I want to head directly for the main guy, like Zelda, right out of the gate, I'm headed over there for Ganon, right? Fucking, I can see Ganon. I'm going after him right now. As you say, your son beat by, right? He was free to go find out how hard it was, or he was free to go somehow figure it out and kill him. But the reality is, he was free. And he may have found out he couldn't even get there. He would die 5 times along the way just trying to get to Ganon, right? Depends on how good he is at the button mashing or whatever his strategy is, or if the game's broken. I mean, some games are broken. So video games is easy to talk about that way. Tabletop gaming, when a GM hand waves something off in D&D, you've broken the game. You're now not abiding by the systems that say, no, you can't heal without cure light wounds. You can't heal without 8 hours of uninterrupted rest. So when a DM changes the rules and waves that shit off, he is now breaking the game. He's breaking the game for everybody's satisfaction. Okay, we all agree that's a new rule. Fine, I have no problem with that. I've been doing that my whole life. But it does a disservice to how D&D was designed and what D&D is as a game. And it's not a game because one particular player can hand wave a rule away. Players can't. Players can't say to the DM, I don't need this I'm going to use my Cure Light Wounds, and the DM says you can't. You used it already today. Nah, I'm going to hand wave that away and say that I draw deep and I do it again. But a GM can. A GM can hand wave that away and say, yeah, go ahead, Joe. Let's go ahead and let you heal up a point. Right? That ain't a game because the DM has this omniscient vision of everything. He can move the ogre from one room to another. That's why D&D is not a game, and it will never be a game because it's not even approached as a game.
Yeah, that's like I said, my son Spencer, when he was like, his interest was that flexibility, and he didn't feel like he was going against something that was
a game. He wanted the game. He wanted the game to be the game. If I'm going to win Monopoly, I want the rules to be abided by, and I gotta basically get lucky on some stuff, but I also gotta beat 4 other guys sitting around the table trying to do the same thing. That's a game, and I want to feel rewarded by finally bankrupting Dell. And I may save Dell to the end. I'm going to bankrupt these other two and get them out of the way because I want to really punish Dell. I'm going to bankrupt Dell the longest possible way around, right?
That satisfaction lies with how you approach it, and if your strategy was successful. Now, I want to throw back to a second. What I realized with you, like when you're playing Grid Zone, and you're playing this thing that you're playing a game, right? But what I'm saying is you're breathing life into it because the most enthralling thing is your commentary that adds the human element
personality.
to it.
I will add I will give a narrative context to why this is important because we've seen this quarterback lose 3 championships, and I'll give a narrative connotation to the context of why this is such a meaningful game for this number on a sheet. Because he's lost 3 championships, and we'll give him a name, and then I'll make this championship narratively more interesting because I'll remind everybody that this quarterback has yet to win a Super Bowl or has yet to win a championship. So I'll also give narrative context to the players, not just to the game, not just to the outcome. I'll give context to it.
Well, yeah, that's next level. And when we play in Dark Age of Man, when you're playing from these. This stuff naturally evolves from your in-character perspective in Dark Age of Man and the interaction that goes along. So, like I said, it's mechanically needed that it derives and alters for the presenter the target difficulties as well as the understood sequence of events that are transpiring at the table.
Yeah.
But it also is next level that everybody can see and visualize what is exactly happening here, and it's not in mechanic speak.
Yep.
It's literally like what is transpiring, because everything you say mechanically, narratively, means something.
Yes.
It adds weight and changes the situation.
As long as at least the presenter says yes and yes but, and hopefully the other players say, you know what? Let's confirm what Dell said about the rain. And on my turn, I confirm. I pull my hood up as I fucking hate the rain, right? I pull my hood up and I'm wringing my hands as the rain just gets to my bones, right? But I'm still headed to the blacksmith. I got something to do with the blacksmith. And Bill says, "Rain doesn't bother me." I open my mouth, cock my head back, and I take the rain in. It's the
that's like a perfect example when one of y'all said it was raining, and I said Boethius because you didn't know that it should be known that he's a little bit of a like a black cloak or a spy. He's inside the church, which was what happened then. Okay,
sure.
So you have a lot of that going on. But I said the gray, that was from the ashes.
Yeah.
Right? That he was sprinkling his hair because there's a need for him to seem older and more infirm, like the club foot. But that he could be taken as like not really relevant.
Now, see, you could have added that. Though.
But
so this is where I talk about diegesis. This is where, and if you'll listen to my Lamentations of the Flame Princess game with Ivan when I played with him, diegesis for me was describing not only Jurgen's actions, but the motivations behind the actions. There were times where it's okay to say his hair is grayed. Why? Because he sprinkles ashes to cloak his true physical age. And that can be just as narratively rich because we're all going, oh shit, there's this motherfucker, there's a mystery to this motherfucker. If not, you say that, but if we don't get it, we don't know. I wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. So if you say because he uses ash to hide his real age, we start going, why would he want to hide his real age? That adds to the game. There's a diegesis there that that adds to a narratively rich by telling us that is okay. It's okay to give us that third party, right, diegesis.
Yeah, I didn't want. I like to.
You don't have to, but if you did, then we are. Then it is right.
You notice that it's washed out of his hair. For some reason, it seems darker. Is it just because it's wet, or is it just because what? And then I'll leave it like that, and we carry on.
And that's exposition, right? So again, part of my problem. I've said this before. The Japanese, everything's exposition in anime, in Japanese video games, in anime, everything's exposition. It drives me fucking bananas. I hate exposition storytelling. Hate it. Fucking hate it. So when you say through exposition because I sprinkle ashes in my hair too close, that's exposition. And I actually prefer you just describe it and then later describe it differently, leaving it for us to either notice or not notice. It doesn't matter. It matters, but it's kind of like I've said before. Lowest denominator filmmaking, lowest denominator writing. It's for ignoramuses. It's for people who don't get it. Go ahead and tell your story, and if somebody doesn't get it, that's their problem. For those who do get it, it's a remarkable piece of artwork. Usual suspects. Don't tell us. Don't at the end of the movie then say, "Well, how did you know Bill killed his sister?" And they give the exposition of how the detective. It's like, holy shit, dude! If people can't put the shit together and figure out how you figured out how the detective figured out who killed the sister, then let them be ignorant of it. Let them be morons and let them hate it. Don't put an expositional 10 minutes of the detective telling us how he solved it. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude. But I understand they do that for the ignorant who could not in the film figure out the red herrings from the other, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I actually like it when people describe something and may not tell us what it's referencing, right? I very often will because it's an expression of my character on a level that I need to communicate to the party that everyone at the table understand there's something here that it's going to become a complicated communication later if I don't make it clear now, right?
No, it's dependent on that, but because he's a bit of a spy or cloak somewhat, I thought it was more appropriate just to say that because I wasn't going to be forward of that. It needed to come that way. But I'm going to throw back for a second about the conversation about the video games and the Dark Souls because I had been for years like playing the Piranha Bytes like Gothic and Risen,
love all those.
and Elix. Okay, but why I do that, and it gives you freedom to go off, like you said, in certain areas. Like one example, like in Elix, I go up, I'm running and skirting every danger all the way up to like the frozen Arctic, and I get up to this building, and I climb up the back way, and I'm dropping down in between the two guards at the front to try to get inside, and they would shoot me like 50 times before I got to that center elevator that lets me go down, so I could find that one little piece to go on the robot to put him in there and try to get it, and I finally did it. There's other times when I go to purposely try to get, in other words, I'm trying to get to a Dark Souls experience to where I figure that I get my satisfaction from finding how to break the game.
Correct. You get your satisfaction from critical thinking and problem solving, not button mashing.
But I have to make it so by finding those areas. And that's not only like every time I play that game, I will go off, divert off to an area to where I can get that satisfaction doing that. Right. And that to me is like, I'm just saying, I don't need a situation where I'm level 2 versus level 2, level 10 versus level 10. You know, in games that are kind of like that, you say you want to grind and go out into areas that's more appropriate for you, or either you grind more and then you go into an area and you just slaying them without any kind of repercussion, and you just grind some more so you can be well bolstered to handle anything. I want situations where there's a crisis that I have to learn how to avoid. Even though I think that's a little bit shallow for me to go into a situation, like I would just be running loops, and like Dragon Age, call it Scooby-Doo, and I would send one of them out to get the attention of the AI of the group, and then that one I'd run it around in a circle while the rest of them changed, and then my other group is at the edge of them. There's just peppering them with arrows until they all fall dead behind them.
You discovered a strategy and you exploited it. And exploits, they call them in video games. You find a hole or an exploit and you utilize it to get to get some satisfaction as a player, as a human being doing a thing. I tend to like role-playing games that compel me through narrative because they're not going to compel me through grinding and they're not going to compel me through button mashing. I will accept button mashing is the mechanism if the game compels me to keep playing through narrative, right?
Yeah.
If a game doesn't get me through compelling narrative, then I'm not probably going to tolerate the button mashing for any period of time, and I'm not going to tolerate the grinding so I can beat the next boss on a linear path. Demon Souls was revolutionary to me. So why do I play sports games? Why do I love sports games? Because every single game in and of itself is its own puzzle. Trying to figure out a way to beat this team and then trying to find a way to be consistent, etc. Okay, the problem with sports games, right, is they can be exploited with golden plays and it's no fun anymore, whatever. Okay, I'm not talking about sports games are great. What I'm saying is they provide this instant that every game is its own entity and its own puzzle, and we move to the next thing. Demon Souls was the first video game I ever played in my life where it felt like an actual sports game. I felt like the actual game was an athletic competition for me because it was not only dexterous, but it demanded critical thinking and problem solving, and of course physical. And I had the most amazing. It was a transcendental. And gaming for me has always just been a pastime. I love gaming. I will always game. It's entertainment. I'd rather do that than read a book. I'd rather do that than watch a 30-minute shitty TV show. So gaming is just active. It's an active thing, and I like to do it. But very often it's killing 2 hours before work or something, or I'm killing time because I have nothing else to do or whatever. But Demon Souls was transcendental. I ended up playing that for 200 hours, and for me that's a long time. I think the most I've ever played any game is about 200 hours, right? So Demon Souls for me was this, and it was this sense of it almost felt like a sport. I was getting better. I was getting smarter. I was becoming a master at this thing, and I don't feel that way with just with button mashing probability games, right? I know that I can grind and get stronger in Dragon Age and then waylay the biggest dragon because I'll just be so powerful at some point. It'll be pretty easy to waylay a dragon. But in Demon Souls, you had to always. There were times that I was a master, and then I would get to an area and flub up my command of the sticks and end up dead at the hands of some weaker thing. And like, oh yeah, right. I got to remember, I could fucking die at any moment, right? And it was the most different experience I'd ever had in video gaming, right? Yeah. And it was made special by and there were reasons why Demon Souls even got my attention. It was Western fantasy, which that's what I'm about. I'm not Eastern fantasy is not my thing. Sci-fi is second on the list. So dark, Middle Ages, swords and shields, some magic, and grotesque beasts. Instantly, Demon Souls won me over just with Western-themed fantasy. And of course, then the mechanisms of death and how they use death as an actual mechanism. And then they quantified the value of death by attaching it to the currency, and the currency in the world being what's lost when I die. So dying is not dying, start over, what a waste of time. I've lost my currency. It's sitting out there in space, and if I don't get it again before I die again, I lose 20,000 souls, and those souls become what I spend to get stronger and better because I am going to be going through that foggy door soon, and I need to make sure I'm a little more stronger. Every fucking device he did, he set the basis, and then he said, okay, for this mechanically base of player experience to work, we now have to have these other mechanics that support the base mechanic. And then you have this thing that became Souls gaming. It became Souls-like. It's a genre that had never existed before it. And now it is gigantic. As there are Souls ripoffs. And then there, of course, is the man who's been making the Souls games, Dark Souls. Of course, Elden Ring, I think, is probably the apex masterpiece of his work thus far because he changed it into an open world, truly gigantic game. And understanding first the experience he wanted players to have, and then making sure all the other mechanics supported why you would ask them to go through this and why you would ask them to have this leveling up, grinding, why they would choose not to grind, why they would attack a creature they can't beat or they don't know they can beat, but they haven't figured out how to beat it yet. It's amazing. And then to have an online component that you play with other people and you can't speak to them, You can't communicate with them? That was unbelievable. It was unbelievable to invite a stranger into my game to help me beat a creature, and they're there, and they're working with me in unison to beat a boss I couldn't beat, and you can't speak. It was the most rewarding camaraderie with complete strangers in the online experience. And the second tier of his online experience was you would be invaded by guys that would hunt you down. So you're playing, you're fighting your ass. I get chills now just talking about Demon Souls. I mean, it gives me fucking chill bumps because I'll never forget the first night that I'm playing one night, and I've been playing for a couple hours, and I'm about to go through and face this demon, this boss, and I think I'm finally ready. And I cross through the fog to face the boss, and the thing pops up and says, John 48962 has just invaded your game. And you know that there's a dude that just came into your game and is hunting you while I'm about to fight this fucking. So and most of the guys who invade your game, I was 50-50. Some of them would invade my game and they'd find out I was badass and they'd get waylaid quickly. Some invade your game and they're like fucking masters and they waylay you in like 2 shots. And one of the greatest experiences I ever had in an online invasion, I fought a guy who invaded my game. It was a 45-minute epic melee, sword, shield. And we fought physically for 45 minutes before I finally defeated him. And I have never had an experience like that. And that's the closest thing to professional gaming that professionals must feel. Guys that are in professional teams that play professionally. It was the closest thing to a professional gaming experience I've ever had in my life. And a 45-minute melee, he would roll away and he would hit his stuff, and we'd battle and fight and battle, and I would roll away and hit we couldn't best each other. It took 45 minutes to finally best. It was like an epic heavyweight fight where you finally, in the 15th round, catch him on the chin and finally drop him, and you're like, fuck, thank you, God. And my hands hurt. I had blisters, and it was like that was the apex of my gaming existence. At that point, I thought I could die tomorrow, and I will never have a better video game experience in my life, and I never have. I've never had a better video game experience.
Yeah.
But that's not for everybody. But I'll never forget the fear, the panic I would have when it would pop up and say Joe has invaded your game, or Bill, or whatever they were, whatever their screen name was, and say they've invaded your game. I would literally go into cold sweats and panic because because you worked so hard to be doing what you're doing, and they could only invade your game when you were in human form. So when you were in human form, you were more powerful. So you wanted to stay in human form. When you were in Soul's form, you were less powerful, but they couldn't invade your game. So you would go ahead and use one of your very, very rare resources to turn into a human. So you were more powerful to advance. And then they would invade your game and like, fuck, I just spent that resource to become a human. Fuck, they're invading my game, right? So all of these little components made it such a rich, dynamic, and I would say a master experience. Yeah, unbelievable. I'm ranting now. Oh, I lost you. Did you leave?
No, I'm here. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I got to go to the doctor, man. I got a doctor's appointment, so I got to get going. But this was not supposed to be a podcast, but I think I may put this up as podcast 6. What the hell? But so let's. I will work on some examples for Words of Power, and then we'll decide whether we should leave it in and change it. I'll look at yours, and then we'll decide.
Yeah, I'll cover just to wrap up. I think that's what I was trying to get with the Demon Soul experience. I think we both kind of search for that. You know, when I play games like Gothic or whatever, I would try to put myself in a situation, even if it incorporated what maybe you break the game or whatever, but it was trying to do something difficult because a lot of it was fighting really overpowered monsters that I could feel like more satisfaction that I figured out, puzzled out.
Yeah.
Even if it was a way to doing that. So I know how that, that would feel. In the open world exploration, I love that too, as far as in open world games, like you're talking about Elden Ring or whether it's Fallout or whatever.
Yeah, because there's a mystery. I want to know what's around that corner. I want to know what's in that cave. And there's trepidation because what's in that cave could be the grotesque, most dangerous thing I've ever run into. So there's always little sweaty hands and a little trepidation, the mystery. And in a game like Elden Ring, or even Demon Souls, the original game, around that corner could be your death, and it could be the death that you can't overcome for hours or days.
That's what people talk about lethality, but you want it to feel like there's something to risk, You want to feel like there's immersion as far as like the possibilities out there that you can explore.
Yeah.
And also you want to know that you can have that satisfaction of overcoming something.
Yeah.
It's not just being on some kind of a loop with similarly compatible enemies that you're just flipping through. Right. That to me is shallow gaming.
Well, that's actually not shallow gaming. That's gaming. That's Nash's equilibrium. Level 2 has to face HD2. Level 3 has to face HD3, or equal to the party level. So if I have 4 level 3 party members, that's roughly level 12. They need to be facing challenges. That's gaming. That's Nash's equilibrium. But D&D isn't a game. But ironically, the expectations of leveling up is that you're going to be in a balanced situation. Gary Gygax, level 1, for level 1 parties. The challenges should be equal to level 1. They know when they go down a level in the dungeon, they're going down into level 2 shit. If they ain't level 2, they better reevaluate that or they're all going to be dead. Get out. So leveling in D&D quite literally was matched to the level of the party. And if you were going down and you weren't leveling up, you were a moron. You were going to die. Your party was going to end in a TPK, and it ain't the fault of the DM. Those were game things. And most people don't know that, and they don't care. They don't play it that way, and vice versa. I don't care.
Yeah.
But gaming, that's where it is a game, is that so a video game definitely is balanced. Level 2 for level 2, because they can control the math in video gaming quite literally.
Exactly.
I want to experience something else at a table than just what I could get in a video game. I want to experience the human condition. I want to experience human beings. I want to evolve. I want to be challenged in a way that isn't just a dice roll combat challenge. I want to be challenged in a way. Does my character psychologically feel the effects of Boethus not doing what I think a man of God should do? And is that important to me? And if it is, how do I respond to that? I want to respond to the grudge guardian who consistently was digging up my family, right? It wasn't like Todd just did it. This had been like the 4th time the fucker dug up my family, right? And so there's this, damn it, And so I'm responding to it as a human being, as a character, as a 17-year-old kid who's just had it with this grunge guardian, right? And those things don't occur in video games unless they're triggered by events in video games. Part of my problem with video games, I'm having the exact same experience in many ways that anybody else who plays it has. So if I play Dragon Age, I'm going to have the same experience that they are. I might have a different character with different colors, skin, different hair, different class, but we're all going through those story trigger points, and we're making a couple of decisions, but we're all playing the same experience for the most part. Skyrim was open world and said, dude, you don't have to have the same experience or story that anyone else has by just doing whatever the fuck you want to do in Skyrim. So everybody's story of their experience in Skyrim is special because it was theirs. It wasn't the same story everybody was having, right?
Yeah. There's you open the door with me, like I said, when you're playing like Grid Zone and your commentary over that. The point being is it's more than just and I know you're doing commentary and adding flavor to it, but that human aspect and element, even if you could reference back to, like, this is the 3rd time that he did that, it draws us to where we can understand it. I wrote this short story years ago, science fiction, about interstellar travel. I've mentioned it before, but Stanley Schmidt wrote on the thing too, that really the story, when it comes down to it, is about the characters, right? I love that. We're watching The Expanse last night. He's going like, Thomas Jane's character, he's sitting there and he's talking about using, no spoilers for anybody who hadn't watched it, but a certain thing to basically be a battering ram. And he said all of the geeks have already did this and that and the other. I love that reference because it said what Stanley Smith said, no matter how, because I was just writing something that would explain how mechanically that it could be achieved is as far as like on a generational ship where the android that had been on there was teaching the new generation as they were just arriving, that it was all a scientific thing. It wasn't a character development. And that's what I'm talking about. Like mechanically, if you focus on that, when he said in the story, if you don't have character development and the human aspect of what you were trying to lend to like Grid Zone and making it palpable, like there's a story here, there's interaction, there's a human aspect and element. And we're trying to do that with this game, but as a community of characters sitting down and interacting with each other, and it involves social experience on a level everybody's having their own depth of character development and interaction. It's a beautiful thing. And it's not just mechanically to say, like, playing to mechanics, like you're talking about. Well, my character can do this. My character.
It's time to check your stress mechanic here, right? It's
liberation and
it's a game mechanic. It's a game. It's an element that changes the way the game functions when you pass those rolls or fail. But you're playing to a mechanic, and that mechanic is going to come up, and it's designed to come up, and therefore you're going to have that particular experience, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's just the nature of. But if you don't use it, then why are you playing that game?
Yeah.
Play something else if you're not going to use the mechanic. So that's why I've said before, if you're going to hot rod a game, understand that everything you changes everything for the players, right? One change changes. When I add binding wounds to Moldvay D&D, I have fundamentally changed the experience the players are going to have as a lethal game.
Exactly.
Nothing wrong with that if your goal is to make Moldvay basic D&D less dangerous, right? By adding binding wounds. But know that it will fundamentally change the lethality of D&D.
Yeah.
It changes the necessity of a cleric who must memorize a limited number of spells every day, and he's going to have to make some tough decisions on who he cures and who he doesn't cure. When you add binding wounds, you've just taken a pressure point off the cleric character. He now doesn't have to worry about cure light wounds, ever. So you've fundamentally just taken pressure off the cleric character, who has to make tough decisions. Do I heal Jose, or do I heal Eloy? Jose has been a badass, killing a shit ton of enemies, but Eloy has only 1 hit point left. Who do I spend my cure light wounds on here? So if I add binding of wounds to D&D, I've just eliminated the cleric's one of the toughest decisions he's going to have to make.
You're eliminating situational.
You're eliminating strategy. Hey, I have 3 slots. Do I memorize 3 cure light wounds, gentlemen? Or what do you want me to do? And they all say, dude, we're about to go into some caverns we know are infested with goblins. Dude, get all your cure light wounds. Get all the cure light wounds, dude, you can, because we're going to need them. Binding of wounds, don't ever need them. So understand, when you hot rod a fucking game, you are fundamentally adding a mechanic or removing a mechanic that fundamentally changes the experience for the players, and it's going to change the experience of the cleric. There is no such thing in tweaking or hot rodding that doesn't fundamentally change the intent of the game, the design of the game.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the Dark Age of Man. We got the levels of wounds from death. So everybody's the same. Great decision. Yeah. We got the target difficulty, and we got the competency level. It's a secondary thing for the attributes to say, because like if I can still get taken out as a fighter as opposed to a monk or whatever, but I may have equipment that could help me better contend with, and my abilities can be set as a certain thing to where some of it may be narratively obvious that I can walk into a room with a peasant and intimidate him with my body or whatever like that, but he could still.
I don't care. I don't care who you are in our world. Like a human being, everybody, no matter who they are, can only suffer 4 wounds.
Yeah,
but the guy who puts a shit ton in body and has excellent armor and excellent sword, he's gonna have that die roll positively keep him from being wounded. So he is a better combatant, so he avoids wounding by being a more competent fighter. You're actually a better fighter, not just more hit points. What's wrong with D&D? You're not necessarily a better fighter. However, on the Matrix, as you level up, it gets easier to hit things, right? You get your attack bonus. But in reality, you're really just getting harder to kill. You're not really becoming a more competent fighter necessarily. Certainly not against equal opponents. If armor class is 0 is the best armor class that can exist in Moldvay, as you level up, it gets easier to hit armor class 0. So you are becoming more competent, but you're also becoming more harder to kill. Right? Yeah. Our game, everybody is mortal. Everybody has the same. You hit me with a cart 50 miles an hour, it's going to kill me. It's going to kill you. It's going to kill 99% of people that are hit by a cart 50 miles an hour are going to die. Right? There's not some guy who's going to, is going to handle being hit by a cart 50 miles an hour any better than another human being on this planet. So you're still vulnerable, but you might be more competent in your actions when it comes to body or combat, based on your gear or your attributes. Spirit, right? There's going to be the guy with the Force Spirit. He's at another level of devout or fundamentally whatever it is that his character represents spiritually. But if he chooses to do body things and ignore his spirit, then he's going to be incompetent. So try
It's just
to
more
play in a world that supports your high-spirited player. A high-spirit player doesn't want to come face-to-face with a Viking. But if you do, you got to find a way to invoke your spirit through a conversation with a Viking that makes the Viking think twice. And
that's why the narrative. That's why the narrative is a mechanic, because no matter what you are, if you know what you're facing, whether there's a fighter that can take you out, how are you going to approach the situation where you can leverage to your advantage, and that you do that. So narratively, none of it's vain. No. It's all very pertinent, mechanically pertinent to what's setting. And this is a beautiful thing, that where you can actually have a game that draws you into these character developments where the narrative means something and it keeps the play alive. And it's, like I said, the mind's out of the table. Everybody can envision this stuff, and it happening. Everything that's said means something. It's really it's next tier to me. So
it is.
That's what I want to keep.
Because the mechanic is
rule sets,
and because there's only one mechanic, people think, oh, dude, there's zero nuance to it. No, it's one universal mechanic. The nuance is in
the play itself. The narrative.
The nuance comes from, well, does the DV go down or does the DV go up? Are you more competent? Are you calling upon body? The nuance is vast and varied by the atmosphere, by the actual narrative, and how you describe your action. The nuance is actually in the play, not in the mechanic. So therefore, there's no mechanic that directs whether you can heal or can't heal. There's no mechanic that directs whether you can use a weapon or not a weapon. There's no mechanic that limits, but there's a mechanic that structures and makes the game mechanical in the sense that we need to still be playing a game that has gambling, so we have risk reward. We have fun with it. If not, it's just a shared, agreed upon nod head. Yeah, you can do that. We got to have that sense of gambling. So I don't call it gaming. I call it gambling. Anytime we roll dice, we're gambling. Anytime we draw a card, we're gambling. There's game components, but it's gambling.
It's risk reward, but that's the beauty of it. I don't want anything that's going to detract from what we've created here. Mm-mm. And trying to quantify little things or say that you could use this or put names, or it will take your eye off the ball, as it was for anybody reading this thing to go that, because I think a lot of it is just intuitively felt and known when you sit down, and it's a reversal of how it was first conceived toward mechanics.
Correct.
But people will gravitate toward that. It's quite natural.
And our game, if you're a master veteran role player, you will be able to come to our table and have the level of experience that's unhindered by your veteran master. But if you're a noob that comes to our game, it's suited for the noob who doesn't know rules and doesn't know what he can and cannot do. You say, dude, you're a human being. Imagine yourself, you're standing in the streets of this medieval village. Over there's the blacksmith hammering away. Over there is a scuffle between a couple of peasants over a loaf of bread. And over here, this thing's going on, and it's cold, and you're standing in about 6 inches of swamp water as it's spring, and it's midday. The sun is there's a low cloud ceiling, and the sun there's not really sun on you, so it's a pretty miserable England day in the spring. What would you do? Go. And there's no, what can I do? There's no, right? Now, they may still do that because they're players, but you're going to have the noob who will take to this because it's like, dude, just think about it. Just pretend. Just declare what you want to do. Describe what you're doing. And we'll do this thing together. And masters can come to the table and run with it.
I like how open it is, like the 3 points. And Jory said, "Well, have you thought about putting a negative in there? Like you could have
it's brilliant.
Literally some kind of thing, and it just 3 points, just negative on that. So it gives you a chance to express that. I could be dumb or whatever and have a negative one mind, and then put something else. And you play that shows from the onset that you can conceptualize a character, what he is, and you're invested in that. You want to represent that in play, and then it just comes out in a different way. So that. The whole thing of the way you can build a character and set them initially is beautiful. And it just lends to, it lends automatically that people go, what are the possibilities? Mm-hmm. When you open up somebody's minds the possibility of what they could do, but you don't want to restrict it to like, oh, you can pick between these 5 classes. You just say, what are you here? And I want to play this orphan, or anybody I think will grasp a hold of that. like certain like Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
The infinite possibilities of the worlds beyond was first introduced, and people grab a hold of it. Oh my God, that could be this and that, and they can sit there and have wonderment over it.
What makes Star Wars? What made Star Wars so phenomenal was its world building was instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
But the mystery of how foreign and how expansive this mystery could be. But instantly recognizable. So what do you do? I mean, how do you create a great world? We get it. It's instantly recognizable. We don't feel completely like strangers in the strange land. We don't feel completely like we're out of the loop. But
you can identify with the characters.
You cannot fathom the infinite mysteries also out there, right? And that's what made Star Wars our American mythology. In a way, we didn't have mythology in America, right? We had the Wild West frontier. We had the frontier mentality and philosophy, and the frontier dilemma for America
is going into the unknown,
right? Yeah. And the thing about frontier for American ideology, for the American culture, people to understand, the frontier was really about two things: man versus nature, justice and freedom. Why are we obsessed with the West? Why were we obsessed with the frontier? And why is it a cultural rich thing for America? We are in an infinite battle with right and wrong. We are in an infinite battle with man versus nature. And we're in an infinite battle of justice and freedom. To have justice, you must have laws. You must have legal. But at the same time, how much of that infringes upon my freedom? And that's where America stands with these ideas of frontierism, not just exploring mystery, right? Yeah. Okay, there's that, and then of course you compound that with colonialism, you compound that with, manifest destiny, all these other things that are, that are morally maybe questionable in the advancement of man across the West. But in American film, in cinema, in storytelling, the frontier, and then of course why the frontier of space became such a big deal in American culture with NASA going to the moon, outracing the communist enemy.
We're all compelled to go out and explore something unknown, whether it's the depths of the ocean or whatever.
Correct.
It really excites the imagination, and you want to do that. We do that with Dredge Water. That's where it is, and then it's a legacy game where you expand out and you uncover, like you explore, like in Skyrim or whatever like that. The possibilities are out there.
And really, Star Trek and Star Wars in many ways became a particular American idea of science fiction, particularly American, right? Yeah. Star Trek, this pursuit of mystery with bringing a higher standard of human idealism, that we don't just approach everything as an enemy. We don't just approach everything with war. We try to be better human beings as we explore. And this is in 1960s, right? I've always said Star Trek is about exploration and being a better human being. In the 60s, they were asking you, be other than the military-industrial complex, oddly couched in a military vehicle, in a military culture, but don't be so fucking military. And that's where Star Trek is an amazing dichotomy of the original Star Trek, right? And then we look at Star Wars became, in a way, our mythology. I think it is the Star Wars became very much the American mythology. I think it is.
Yeah,
its popularity has grown beyond you could ever imagine. It was a B movie that they all thought was going to be complete shit, and turned out to be a cultural phenomenon that, So I really do have to go, man. I'm going to be late for my doc, and they're allowed to be late because they're doctors and they're golfers, but yeah.
The names on the cover has to be considered. The quote, I want to remind you about that, putting it in there.
Yep.
What I had rewrote, I'll send it to you, make sure you got it on the edit. But I think some of it is maybe just examples of play.
Yep.
Do with it what you will, but it also made me think of, like, should we have a little paragraph in there about the intent of what we're trying to do? Or maybe that is incorporated into the intent.
Okay.
And a dedication, I would say, that maybe we could put that in there, but otherwise, I'll let you go. That was pretty much everything on my list.
And so I'll reconfirm this later with an email to Brian and you. The quote. We'll reconfirm this in a shared email, and then I'll submit. I'll look at what you've written for Words of Power, and then we'll mull how we can either keep it or how we can use it, but
fold it into something.
I don't know, because Mark, that was one of the pieces of work that Mark's done for us that's phenomenal. That may be the piece that's too structurally confining. Everything else, but we appreciate what Mark wrote and contributed to the game. So I don't want to throw out anything people put in, or people who have contributed, because we're grateful. but at the same time, I want to make sure it doesn't create this, hey, that's all you can do, right?
Yeah. It's great examples.
Yeah.
But you'll see that what I wrote up too.
Okay,
So
awesome. All right, brother.
Anyway,
I'll see you tonight. We're playing tonight, right?
Oh yeah,
right.
we are.
Okay,
I'll
man.
see
Have
you
a great
then.
day.
You too, man.
All right, bud.